town council and special meeting with the budget committee. It's 6 o'clock. We're doing it by Zoom, unfortunately, due to the weather, which has ended up not being so much of a problem, but we can't change that now. Town council and special meeting with the budget committee. And I'm getting a little feedback for whatever reason, I don't know what, but at any reason, we'll call the roll, we'll do the pledge, and then I will turn this over to Mr. Bowery. So with that, the roll, please.
Tim Slocum.
Here.
Don Walsh.
Here.
David Borowey.
Present.
John Mylone.
Here.
Peter Talbot.
Here.
Sylvia Nichols. David Velber.
Here.
Jim Jinks.
Here.
Sandy Pavano. A quorum is present.
Thank you, Ms. Shepherd. Appreciate that. We'll now do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Bowery, it's your meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate that. And council members, thank you. And certainly Town Manager Kimball and Assistant Town Manager Talbot and Finance Director Chaska and all the others who helped with this. It's a Herculean effort on your part. It's probably the biggest job you have to do all year is to compile the budget, the blueprint of what the spending will be in our municipal government. It's the closest level of government that the people have a say in. You know, there's 9 of us and 30,000 residences, so 1 to 3,000 ratio means we see people at the grocery store, see people at church, see people shopping that we can talk to and get their thoughts and input as to what the level of services balanced with the tax rate should be. And I think we've got a very comprehensive plan here, a very solid plan and one that makes sense. But I also think there's room for us to adjust the recommended rate potentially of taxes. And there's policy decisions we need to make, such as whether or not to spend any ARPA funds, whether to spend more fund balance, all things that the town manager in his 25-page letter of transmittal to us very nicely laid out, very easy to understand what our job is. And we've got 6 budget workshops all set up to review different departments. And it all starts, the public part now all starts tonight. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Kimball and ask him if he is ready to make his presentation and get going.
Just a point of order, Mr. Bowery, do you want to do your basic meeting first and then end up with Sean, or do you start with Sean and end up? I leave it entirely up to you. It's your meeting.
Well, since I did that stem winder of an introduction, why don't we do that? And why don't we say that we're going to have to stop at 6:50? And that'll give us 10 minutes. It's mostly gifts. That's sounds
perfect.
Reasonable.
That's
okay?
Perfect.
All right. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I will share my screen here and just dive right into the presentation. So give me 1 second to do so. And here we go. And then from beginning, let's see if that worked. There we go. All right. Can everyone see the presentation?
Yes.
Relatively clearly at home. Okay.
Yes.
So, and then I'll also activate my little laser pointer here in case I need it. All right. As Chairman Bora, we just indicated, this is really the culmination of months of work on our end, on the staff end, the department heads, Board of Education, obviously, who also approved and sent over a budget, if you will, for consideration. And ultimately now begins the public process with the town council for review and consideration going forward. The operating budget, let me just put forward here. Pursuant to 7-1 of the town charter, the budget must be transmitted to the town council by March 10th. This is the operating budget. The annual capital budget and 5-year capital expenditure plan must be transmitted to the town council by July 15th. Similar to 2 years ago, what you have before you are both of those. Effectively, the capital budget is a few months early, but it allows for the town council to consider both at the same time The requirement for adoption, as a reminder, is for the operating budget to be adopted no later than April 30th. But you do have more time should the council see fit or need it to approve the capital budget really by the end of August if we want to have any items that would go to referendum in November. So again, both have been submitted for your consideration. And again, I'll be presenting both tonight, consistent with the charter. Just a brief overview of what of the kind of the format for this presentation. I'll be beginning with budget context, some facts and figures and considerations of the current economic climate and other budget factors that went into the presentation of this budget. I'll move into revenues, fund balance, and building permit fees. Also expenditures, followed by expenditures and major budget drivers. We'll discuss the mill rate projections and the grand list and ultimately the taxpayer impact, which of course is a major factor of the proposed budget. Talk a little bit about debt service, and then also I'll be presenting a brief summary of the community pool and the water pollution control budgets, followed by the capital budget, and then just ending with the budget review schedule. Again, as we said at the outset, I won't be getting into great detail here, but I want to make sure in some ways we sort of dusted off some of the same conversations we've had both last year and also, of course, the council keeps tabs of throughout the year. But for the public's, edification, this is really restarting this annual budget process and a reminder of some of the drivers and the factors that we have to consider as we go forward. So this will be kind of more on the high level. And again, with all the budget workshops, we'll be diving into greater detail in the coming weeks. So starting at the outset, the overall general fund operating budget is presented to you tonight at $133,461,825. This represents a 6.3% increase or $7.9 million over last year's adopted budget. That's the fiscal 23 adopted budget. You can see the major components here, the 5 major components that we break out here in Cheshire. The general government side, an increase of $2.5 million, about $2.6 million or 7.25%. The education budget as recommended and as unchanged in the present form from the Board of Ed's approved budget at an increase of 5.82% or $4.693 million. And then debt service, an increase, underlying debt service increase of $618,000. The capital non-recurring fund at 1.5 million, which I'll touch on a little bit later, is recommended to stay at 1.5 million. That's cash for capital expenses or one-time expenses, and a contingency budget of 125,000. Just again, the budget context, the last 3 budgets, we've beginning with the fiscal 21 budget, that was the COVID impacted budget, right? If you recall, of course, everybody recalls, but the right around the time of presenting the budget for fiscal 21, that was March of 2020. The world became very uncertain very quickly with respect to the COVID-19 pandemic. The town council that year approved a budget with no mill rate, which means no tax increase for residents and businesses. To do so, we relied on $2 million of fund equity from the fiscal 20 budget surplus. We also cut a number of pandemic impacted services and froze positions in that budget. The following year, the fiscal 22 budget, as we started to restore services, the council approved a 0.5 mil increase, which is a 1.51% tax increase. To do so, we used 1.4 million of the new to us that year ARPA funds as general fund revenue, appropriated 1.5 million of ARPA funds to the BOE Medical Trust, and also appropriated 325,000 for bulky waste collection in that following fall. That came to actual costs ended up being less than that at $239,000. And finally, last year, or the year that we're in currently, the town council last year adopted a 0.6 mil increase, which is a 1.78 tax percentage increase. Less of a reliance on ARPA funds that year as revenue. We did so with $500,000, actually as an increase to that CNR appropriation for one-time expenditures, and also appropriated 1.7 million of our pretty significant surplus that we were able to generate prior year, supported by the fiscal 22 budget surplus. Again, budget context, a major component, as you can see, of the budget is the Board of Ed's budget request. Again, the superintendent will be presenting this in great detail on an evening in a couple of weeks. So this is very high level and by no means exhaustive of the request. But at a very high level, the Board of Ed's request, they're continuing to have insurance claim experience, medical trust fund challenges. And a major driver of that 4.6 million is a 1.5 million increase in their medical benefits budget line, and also growing enrollment. Again, no surprise to the town council and members of the community. Enrollment has been increasing. They're projecting at least 70 additional students, at least as of the budget documents that we received. And this results in additional classroom teachers, additional special ed providers, and nursing support. Just again, some additional context, local unemployment data. Cheshire's been faring very well over the past year. Our most recent data from last month, the January data, was 3% unemployment rate, which is actually the 9th lowest out of all of the towns, 169 towns in Connecticut, compares with a statewide average of 4.2%. We're also dealing with an inflationary economic environment. Again, a little bit better news this morning as CPI ticked down just a little bit over the last 12 months, but still year over year, we're looking at 6% increases in CPI over the last 12 months. And fuel prices, as we all know, continue to be volatile and difficult to predict. We do have all union contracts settled through June 30th of 2024. So when I touch on contractual increases, those are for town contracts. There's no uncertainty with respect to the upcoming budget year from salary and benefits standpoint. All right, a little more information on the budget context. The governor's budget proposal was up slightly for Cheshire. It's an increase of $377,000 to a total of 16 million. The vast majority of that, you'll see in the second bullet there, is that this year, the council will remember last year, we had a sort of a frustrating circumstance of an imposed mill rate cap on motor vehicles, but less than full reimbursement due to a timing issue of the grand list that the state uses to calculate the reimbursement. This year, we get more close to made whole on that because we catch up the additional year. So the increase in the motor vehicle reimbursement that was in the governor's budget for us goes from $373,000 up to $690,000. Again, as you can see, that's the vast majority of the increase. One other item that we'll touch on a little more when we talk about revenues, but there is this municipal revenue sharing account. That's this MRSA bullet here. My little pointer. This was somewhat of a surprise. This fiscal year, part of the reason we're looking at another surplus this year, we received $576,000 from the state that was not planned and not budgeted in the state budget. And ultimately what it is the state divvied up the remaining portion of the sales tax revenue increase that's dedicated to the towns after they've paid from that fund the car tax cap reimbursements and a few other grants, and anything left over was divvied up and sent out as a grant. So something of a surprise revenue that we didn't budget last year, was not included in any of the state estimates. The question this year is, do we count on that happening again? Do we use some of that money as a justification for modifications to the budget upcoming? Do we want to hedge and plan for some revenue from that account? Again, we won't know until sales tax receipts come in next year and everything else. So a topic for the council to consider, but favorable news in the current fiscal year, certainly. A reminder with COVID relief funds, the ARPA funding that we received at 8.5 million, approximately 5.7 million has been appropriated or planned to be used to date by the council. That leaves 2.87 million remaining, not including the potential contingency that we discussed at our last meeting for moving ahead with the Bartland Park South project. Again, that we're also seeking other funding to close the gap for contingency on that project. And finally, the grand list growth. We had another robust year, 2.25%, which is the second highest grand list percent increase in the last 25 years, second only to last year at 3.03%. And again, Cheshire is certainly experiencing robust growth and demand, and we know there's some additional projects, as we all know, lined up in the future that I think will continue to provide positive grand list growth into the future here. So again, just sort of a graphical form of that last statement. the last 4 years have been very robust. We're entering revaluation, which sort of skews everything every 5 years. You'll see the gaps in this chart intentionally. But we anticipate if prices hold as they're projected to, that next year's increase, next year's revaluation will result in an overall significantly higher grand list number, which again will have a positive impact on our mill rate. But ultimately, as we've discussed many times, when it comes to the actual tax bill, other than shifts within the underlying components of the grand list, the impact on the taxpayer is relatively similar to the year before. But the mill rate is an important factor that we monitor very closely with respect to businesses looking to move to town, and obviously we keep a very close eye on our mill rate, not trying to get it too high. So, but that's for next year. You'll see the last 4 years have been very robust and kind of match, really only matched by kind of the late 90s as similar percent increases year over year. Arnett, do you have? I keep getting a note here that Jim Jinks is in the waiting room. I can't. Can you approve that, or is that just showing up on mine?
No, I got it a couple times. So he's having trouble.
He's in and out. Okay. All right. Sorry about that. All right. Moving on. Just a quick summary comparing 4 years here of the revenues, just so you kind of see how things have been trending. Again, our overall, we remain, as all Connecticut towns are, heavily reliant on local taxes, property taxes for the bulk of our revenue. But you will see that state aid has again fluctuated over the last few years. But our other line here, which is really mostly driven by department budgets and also investment income, in fiscal 24 budget, you'll see about a $2 million increase in those lines of revenue. And again, here with fund equity, last year, as I said before, we used 1.7 million of fund equity. And as I'll talk about, I think on the next slide here, I'm proposing a $1.3 million use of fund equity. But really, underlying that's in support of two efforts that are included in this budget. One, $300,000 that's appropriated for, that's recommended to be appropriated for a bulky waste collection this fall, and also $400,000 that's recommended for a property purchase. So really net, the fund equity that we're relying that's not associated with a one-time expense is about $600,000, which is less than we've relied on for really the better part of the last 10 years. So that's an option, that's an opportunity for the council to consider as we look at our surplus numbers and make decisions about modifications to the budget that we can make that will provide some mill rate relief. Again, this is just sort of highlighting the reliance on the property taxes. This is nothing new. This has been the case for many, many years here, certainly in the state. And then again, just another comparison, this time to 5 years before, and you can see with a little more detail, the increases, again, you can see between obviously property tax increases in terms of the tax levy, but also pilot increases from the state and town department revenues that have increased at a lesser rate, but also are significantly increased over where they were 5 years ago. There's a proposal in this budget that is new for council consideration and ultimately would take council adoption through an ordinance if you want to proceed. But I am recommending that we take a look at our building permit fees. I proposed the first increase to our building permit fees since 2005. This proposal would be for the first first $1,000 of construction value, the base building permit fee to increase from $25 to $30. And then for every additional $1,000 of construction, Cheshire currently charges $12 per thousand. And I would recommend that increases to $15 per thousand. This is expected to generate conservatively about $200,000 in revenue. If it had been applied to this current year, which has been extremely robust in terms of activity in the building trades and therefore in our building department, it would be significantly higher than $200,000. But in the revenue budget for this budget, I increased it from $750,000 to $950,000 on the basis of this proposal. Just quickly, without getting into a lot of detail, you can see where Cheshire falls a number of comparable towns, both in our area and across the state. This is sorted by the middle column here, which is the cost per $1,000 of value. And you'll see that Cheshire's on the low end, probably because we haven't increased it in some time. And that the average across all of these towns is closer to the $15 that I'm recommending. And again, there are also additional fees that Cheshire does not charge, including fees for certificates of occupancy and other things that some of these other towns do charge for. So again, it's a consideration. And certainly we're looking for alternatives to alternative revenue sources. And this is something I think that we should just take a look at this budget. That'd be my recommendation. Arnett, do you see Sylvia in there too? Just I've got a note on my screen here. I don't know if I can click it here. Oh, I can. There we go.
Yeah, I got
Sorry
it.
about that.
I got it.
All right. So with respect to, I've mentioned surplus a couple of times. This is a chart that the council reviews each year. Just to quickly walk through it, I think we have a good story to tell here with fiscal for the beginning of fiscal 23, which is the fund balance available on July 1st, 22. We had $15.9 million of reserves. Again, as part of the adoption of the fiscal 23 budget, the council, as I said before, appropriated 1.7 million of fund equity into as effectively as revenue to support the budget, again, on the basis of positive surplus from the year before. So that meant that effectively we started July 1st of 22 with a $14.2 million surplus, or 11.74% of operating expenses. You'll recall the council's policy is 9.25% as a minimum floor. Something for us to consider going forward and potentially raising that to maybe 10%, but again, not a discussion for tonight. But at a minimum, you'll see we were at a healthy fund balance reserve percentage at 11.74% as we started the fiscal year. The center section here is expected revenues for the year, which again, we don't know until June 30th comes around where everything's going to line up, but we are trending and tracking obviously this information very closely. You'll see on the revenue side, on the basis of mostly investment income from higher interest rates, and also that roughly 600,000 of additional revenue we received from the state. Revenues are very favorable this year, and we're projecting about a $2.4 million surplus in revenue. And on the expenditure side, holding pretty close to our expected budget. There could be more favorability as we get closer to the fiscal year end, but we're projecting a $215,000 favorability on expenditures. So ultimately, you take those together, and the results from this year are about 2.6 million, which would bring our projected available fund balance at the end of this year to just under $17 million. The recommendation in this budget that I just mentioned was 1.3 million of that to be carried into the next year. Although, again, two components of that totaling 700,000 are for one-time expenditures. After that 1.3 million, we would expect to be at $15.56 million in reserves, or 12.42% of general fund expenditures for fiscal 23. Again, that floor that I just mentioned of 9.25%, that puts us almost $4 million above that floor. So just kind of some context of surplus and an analysis of our unassigned general fund balance. All right, so after talking about fund balance and revenues, shifting to the expenditure side, again, here's a overall graphical representation of the proposed expenditures. No secret, the Board of Education's budget and their operations is the largest component of our local town expenditure budget. You'll see here the increase across various departments. The bold here for general government are the town side of the street, if you will: administration and finance, planning and development, public safety, public works, public health, social services, cultural services, and leisure services. You'll see the various percent increases. Our contingency budget at $125,000, debt service, and the Board of Education budget, and then finally capital non-recurring. And then I'll just take a minute to talk about the major budget drivers. So again, before we get into general government, Again, the largest increase, the Board of Ed budget at $4.69 million. Debt service at $618,000. The property purchase that we're considering at the corner of Jarvis and Marion is built into this budget at $400,000 as an appropriation in the CNR line. So that equals 400,000 of the overall increase. And then within the general government budget itself, we have pension and 457 401A expenses totaling over $500,000. A large component of that, and something that we'll be discussing, is a recommendation from our actuaries to move from a 7% interest rate or return on investment assumption down to 6.75% is their recommendation. So that generates, that comes with additional costs. It's a large component of this increase. But additionally, as we know, we have a closed pension, but ongoing pension expenses, and in addition, new hires that come in with 401A, 401K style town contribution requirements that are also in today dollars. So we're still in that sort of blended experience between both the legacy pension plan and its associated costs and the 457 401A participants. So that continues to be kind of a double whammy, if you will. Contractual salaries and other positions in the budget at $463,000. Vast majority of this is not is again required by the contracts that we've already agreed to for the existing positions. So that's kind of a typical number there. Medical insurance on the town side, again, I referenced the experience the Board of Ed's been having. We have had a less favorable year than last year, but we're roughly on track. I think we're about $200,000 off of our as of our January claims with respect to our experience in the medical trust fund. Based on experience, the renewal percentages have come in, and I'm recommending a budget increase of $378,000. Again, we'll be talking more about this on Thursday night. Information technology, it's a relatively significant budget increase here. There are a number of hardware and software required replacements within their budget requests, and security upgrades, disaster recovery software packages that all totaled, when we go through those again on Thursday night, come to $310,000. I mentioned before, bulky waste collection planned for the fall of 23 as recommended by the council, the council's solid waste committee. We have quotes from AJ and a recommended appropriation of $300,000 should we plan to go ahead with the fall bulky waste collection. The volunteer fire pension changes, both with respect to changes the council agreed to earlier in the year, but also the associated changes from reducing the interest rate to 6.75% comes to $245,000. And then increases to heart and hypertension and workers' comp insurance costs come to $101,000. You'll see that outside of these items, everything else in the budget is not only flat in total, it's actually down $115,000 before you get to this net 7.9 million. So that's just some context that a lot of these items, again, they're not these are not wants, and these are really needs more than wants in terms of where where they're falling out. These are items that we don't have a lot of control over, or their commitments we've made. And I wish I could say there was a lot added to this budget that we could easily cut. And of course, if there was, it wouldn't be before you right now once we saw where these percentages were coming in. So again, this will all be we'll all be diving into this in greater detail as we go through the workshops in the coming weeks. What's the overall impact on the pocketbook? This mill rate cap on vehicles makes this chart a little different than you probably remember it in past years. Effectively, because there's a cap on mill rate, so long as we are above this 32.46 mils, that portion of our grand list, the motor vehicles, is really no longer a mill rate sensitive item, right? Because there's a set amount that you're multiplying that portion of the grand list against. So what I've done here is shown the average residential property with its current taxes at 34.32 mils. And in order to support this budget, a 1.77 mil increase. That brings us to a 36.09 mill rate as recommended in this budget. Ultimately, that is a difference of $376 in this scenario, because the mill rate cap is frozen. And if we are assuming the same vehicles for an average taxpayer, what we're effectively doing is applying the same mill rate in both years, right? Because other than some underlying changes in the value, which we did experience large changes in car values last year, less so, certainly less so this year. For the calculation purposes, those effectively become flat. So overall, the proposed annual tax increase, if you take our traditional one home and two vehicles, is a $376 increase, which comes to about 4.6% of a year-over-year tax increase for a resident. Shifting over to, why this is blocked here, debt service as a percent of general fund expenditures. Over the years, again, knowing we have some large capital items in the future, we've worked very hard to keep our percentage down. These are very low percentage. These are the percentages debt service represents within our overall budget. We are presently at 5.9%. Over the years, we've supported that, and certainly through the debt service associated with the water treatment plant upgrades a few years back. We've had debt service reserves to rely on and try to offset the overall impact on the general fund operating budget. Those, as we've discussed in recent years, are no longer as available as they were before. And of course, we've added and committed to really the town's most significant capital investment in history, frankly, with the next generation school building project for 2 new elementary schools. So shifting from where we were before to where we are going. And then this is no surprise to any of us. We know that in the next coming years, we'll be having additional debt service impact. But this next year, we have proposed about a 6.2% of general fund operating expenditures. But as the expenses from building the 2 new schools come online and the debt service that's associated, we see that ticking upwards to closer to 13 and 14% of the general fund operating budget. And again, this is just probably greater detail than you need at this point, but these are the gross general fund projections of debt service on an annual basis. Again, those debt service reserve funds that are, again, no longer as available as they were before, but again, a consideration for the council to look at as we consider debt service going forward. The total of the offsetting resources, and then again, these would be our projections for what you'd actually see in the operating budget in the coming years from now through 2033. And again, just graphically showing before this light green representing the use of reserves or other sources of revenue to offset, keeping our effective debt service budget line low, and again, creeping up in the coming years, fiscal 24, 25, and beyond. All right, shifting quickly to the community pool fund. This has really been a success story. I know that if you've had a chance to read the transmittal, the pool has been doing very well over the last year plus. Their pool fee revenues are tracking to meet or exceed the $725,000 budget for the current year. Last year, they ended with a surplus over $250,000, which I don't think we've ever been able to say. Certainly in the last 10 years. And so ultimately, between last year's experience and this year's experience, we were able to take some of that savings with respect to the general fund pool subsidy. If you recall, usually over $400,000 we have to budget for pool subsidy in the general fund operating budget. This year we were able to reduce that by $272,000, which would still leave the pool with $100,000 of reserves at the end of this year, if things hold to projections. Again, representing substantial reserves from the community pools standpoint. But again, from meets and lessons activity, the pool has been having really just a banner year. So credit to everybody, Sheila and her team, and John Golick and everybody that have been working hard to continue to shore up the community pool going forward. It's a wonderful, wonderful asset for the town. And then the Water Pollution Control Department Fund, this budget ends up as a proposed decrease of $72,034. there is a recommended $5 sewer fee increase. This budget recommends funding a full-time mechanic position that would replace a full-time operator 2 position. So with that exchange, no added positions, but also restoring a vacant clerk typist position in the budget, part-time position. There's a projected fiscal 23, that's the current year, $188,000 use of reserve fund equity. Those are due to the ongoing remediation deferred maintenance expenses for the current year. And again, the reserves at the end of the year are projected to remain healthy at $1.4 million or 32% of their annual operating expenditures. All right, so that's the operating budget in a very high level nutshell. I will quickly go through the capital plan and then wrap up with just a little more information about upcoming meetings. Again, this historically is reviewed in the summer and approved by late August for a November referendum for those items over $500,000. Last year, we adopted kind of in 2 phases, both June 21st and also August 23rd. That was due to the splitting out really of the school project that needed to be adopted earlier in the other items for referendum. And this includes also a 5-year plan for capital expenditures. But as a reminder for everyone, those watching home, year 1 is the only year actually appropriated and approved as authorized for spending. Years 2 through 5 are really more of a planning document and allow us to project out that debt service that you saw on the slide that probably nobody enjoyed seeing a little earlier. But again, we use those numbers and recommended projects for years 2 through 5 as planning dollars and expected expenses in the future. But ultimately, the council decides on a year-to-year basis what's actually approved in the upcoming fiscal year. This year, we had over $110 million requested by departments in the Board of Education. I reduced this by about almost $2.8 million for recommendation of $107 million. Again, that's overall 5 years of the plan. This is a decrease of $131,000. That's really only due to the inclusion of the $166 million Next Generation 2 New Schools appropriation. So it's sort of a strange bullet there, but so it's important to note that we have net offsetting grants and available CNR cash funding projected out for the next 5 years, totaling just under $10 million, which reduces the net capital cost for bonding purposes to $98,377,000. The adopted 5-year CEPs have averaged about 97.3 million gross and 43.2 million net over the past 5 adopted budgets. Again, this is the same information I just gave you. Again, we've footnoted the fiscal 23 obviously sticks out with the inclusion of the 2 new elementary school projects. But this is a 10-year history of our gross 5-year plan and our net 5-year plans, as well as the gross year 1 approved capital budget for approved projects, in addition to the year 1 net budgets for capital projects. Again, this year, fiscal 24, there are recommended first year projects totaling just under $12 million. Some highlights: there's $2.2 million included for 2 new fire trucks. You will hear a lot from Chief Kasner about the necessity, and it's largely driven on the fact that currently there's a 39-month lead time on new orders of fire trucks. So in order to get our sectors queue for plans that are trucks that are needed 3 years out, 4 years out, that's why you're seeing the recommendation for 2 vehicles in this current budget. $1.9 million included for road improvement program, $600,000 proposed for the general land acquisition account, and also $3.6 million requested by the Board of Ed for various school projects. And with that, just a reminder that currently on the town's website, cheshirecT.org, you can find all of these budget documents. This presentation will be up either later this evening or tomorrow morning, but the budget files, including the detail and the overall financial plan for community services, are all available on the website. And just very briefly, we have upcoming budget calendar. This Thursday via Zoom, we'll be reviewing employee benefits, general services, administration of finance, economic development, town attorney, and public health. Next Wednesday will be the public hearing on the budget at 6 p.m. in council chambers, and also subsequently a review of social services, library, arts place, planning department, building department, town clerk, and elections. We have Tuesday, March 28th at 6 p.m. via Zoom, a review of the public safety items of fire, police, and animal control. Thursday, March 30th via Zoom, we have public works, parks, WPCD, public property, recreation, and the community pool. April 4th, Tuesday, April 4th in council chambers will be a review of the Board of Education's budget and capital expenditure plan. And finally, April 6th, we have council chambers will be the proposed town council information session. And then from April 17th to April 26th, additional budget review as needed, really everything subsequent to April 6th by the town council. And a proposed date of Thursday, April 27th at 7 p.m. for proposed town council meeting for budget adoption. But again, with a deadline of April 30th. And with that, just want to quickly thank the folks in our finance department and our town manager's office budget team, Sharon Sherma, Gina DeFilio, Jim Jascott, Hope Larson, Don Olette, Noel Shepherd, Arnett Talbot, Christine McCardle, Anne-Marie Burr is on the call here, and Lou Zullo. So thank you to everyone who helped throughout the last couple of months pulling this all together. We look forward to your consideration. So I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Budget Chair.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Kimball. That's a very good overview. Hopefully we will have a chance to watch the schedule and see which departments are coming up so we can be prepared with our questions and comments. And I know there's a lot more information to come as the budget gets worked up. When we have 6 weeks or so from the time we get the budget until we adopt, there are often quite a few changes and quite a few updates that will come in. So I'd ask if we'd hold our questions or whatnot, unless somebody has a real general question, that we hold them until we get to the department meetings. But Mr. Malone?
Just a quick one, Sean, will you send us that, or will we get that PowerPoint breakdown? Because that was helpful in a simplistic form. Typically, we would get it.
Yeah, actually, I did. I tried to send it about a half hour ago. I will say
you did?
it had 2
I didn't.
attachments. So
Okay.
did anyone else receive it? One of the
It's
files.
with, I think it's
I
with the
got it.
town manager's report.
Yeah,
It's on the PDF.
Yep.
Yep, I sent them both in one email. So yeah, John, just double check it. If you
Okay.
didn't get it, let me know and I'll send it again.
I didn't look, so I'm sure I see something from you, so I sure, thank you.
All right, no problem. Yep.
Very good. All right, so with that, I'll ask the budget committee if we could get to the rest of our items on the agenda. So in a timely manner, we could conclude those items as well. So I'll ask items 3 through 12, since they are gifts and donations, and they're items that are on the consent calendar. If we would like to take those all as one, and certainly we can ask any individual questions that we might have, but who would like to for discussion, move that we recommend to the full council acceptance of items 3 through 12.
I'll move those.
Okay, Jim, and seconded by John. All right.
Yes.
Any discussion or questions on any of those items?
Nope.
All right, all those ready to vote, all those signify in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Passes unanimous. Item 13 is an unusual one to come up, but certainly makes sense if we had a chance to read the memo. Approval of refunds for tax overpayments. This is a process that we need to properly follow, and it's an adjustment of a process that we've been following, and there aren't very many. They're all very logical reasons. Some, people made a double payment, some overpayments, some adjustments by the assessor. So, Sean, is there anything more that you want to add to that?
If I could just briefly, again, this is a new item, but it's also an opportunity to introduce in person, although I guess I can't technically say in person, but I know I announced at a prior meeting that Anne-Marie Burr is our new tax collector, replacing Bill Donlin. She's been with us for just under 2 months now, I think, right? In the middle of January, even less than that. So, and she's been reviewing all of the policies and procedures and office policies. And she's with us here tonight and maybe can just give you a brief overview. But as you indicated, Mr. Chairman, this is something that you'll expect to see, and we'd like to, and we would suggest would be put forward probably on consent, potentially each year through the each month through the budget committee. And really to follow statute, we want to make sure that the council ultimately approves these refunds before they go to the finance department. So Anne-Marie, if you can unmute, maybe you can just give a brief summary of this item.
Everyone, it's just,
Welcome.
thank
Yeah,
you,
welcome.
thank you. Statute says that that the refunds have to be approved through the legislative body before they go to finance. In learning the new processes that are a little bit different between Prospect and Cheshire. This is, as I'm learning, this is where I'm coming up with these little little things that I keep running upstairs and talking to Arnett and James about. So if we could just put it on the agenda for each month, I will submit a summary as I did this month. And once they're approved, I can send it up to finance to get the people the refund of their monies.
That will work fine. We certainly will be. It's nice to have a new set of eyes every now and then looking at things. We certainly, you have big shoes to fill, but we're glad you're here and you have a lot of experience right next door. So we're glad to have you on board, and we certainly wish your predecessor a good retirement and
Yes,
appreciate his hard work as well. Hopefully set things up for you to have a nice smooth office to walk into and continue.
it's a great place to work.
Good, good. All right. Well, are there other questions, Budget Committee members?
Yeah, I have one question.
Sure.
About the, does the assessor adjust mean that someone came in and said that my vehicle is worth this much and then it was adjusted? What does that mean?
It really depends on if they had already paid that. That has to go through the Board of Assessment Appeals or through an assessor adjustment. So if they pay in full when it's due and then they, bring in something stating that it's not worth what they were charged, that all goes through the assessor's office. The tax collector has no authority to adjust any tax bill.
Okay, but that's what that means though, is that the assessor changed the value based on an appeal of some kind?
Either an appeal, or it could have been the vehicle maybe was sold, or it was totaled, or there's a lot of different things, or maybe it moved out of state, and was registered in a different state. So the various reasons for the assessor's adjustments. And then I review, once the refund comes in, the request for the refund, I review it and make sure that everything looks according to statute. And then I'll sign off on it, and that's when I'll send it to council.
Right, okay, all right, thank you.
All right. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, sensing you're ready to vote, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All right, all three of us. Next item on the agenda, acceptance and appropriation of $78,953 in ARPA funds from Connecticut ADS ARPA Senior Center allocation to the Cheshire Senior Center. Effectively, we saw the memo. This is for the jitney bus. I forgot what else you call it, but is there anything to elaborate, Sean or Arnett?
John, you want me to take this one?
You
There
can.
there were two particular items that the senior center would like to use this money for. One is a minivan. The wonderful transportation buses that we have are 12-passenger buses.
Mhm.
And while they're excessively used, there's limitations to them. For example, there are people who are disabled who cannot get down the driveway to the 12-passenger bus, and the 12-passenger bus is too large to get up their driveway. Also, if someone needs a ride out of town for a doctor's appointment, it can tie up a 12-passenger bus for a couple of hours, which obviously limits everyone else's usage. If we could get a minivan, fully handicapped, that can access driveways and make special trips for out of town, it would tie up the other buses, the 12-passenger buses, and we have a pretty steep demand for that transportation service. And then the other request is for updated laptops and computer equipment. Some of the technology at the senior center has gotten, I guess, appropriately senior. It needs to be replaced, and we also need, and we've looked at this for years, we need a better sound system in that main room. Even if you're not elderly without hearing loss, it's difficult to hear. And there are an awful lot of events and programs in that room. So those are the two pretty useful plans for this money if the council so approves of those uses and accepts the money. Oh, I
Is
should
this one-
say, I'm sorry.
Nope.
This money
on.
comes from the state. The ARPA money went to the state. The state senior services that has distributed this money, has allocated it among senior centers. So it's a separate pocket of ARPA money that was specifically designated for this purpose. I should have explained that.
This minivan is in addition to one that we received a grant for just recently as a replacement, right?
No, that was the mini bus. So one of those 12 passenger buses was recently replaced. We try to
Right.
replace them every couple of years because they get well used. So this is in addition to,
Addition.
yeah, it's a small vehicle in addition to the larger vehicles.
Okay. Is there an expected increase in staffing for this in order to manage it, or the same driver would just decide which vehicle depending on how many people for the appointment?
Among the drivers, between the drivers that they have and the substitute drivers that they have, they'll be able to cover this. They're covering it now, but they're covering it while making less spots accessible.
Mhm.
So
All right. Other questions or comments? Mr. Slocum?
Yeah, I asked this question only because I can. This is actually going to be a recurring cost, maybe every 7 or 8 years, perhaps, and that likely, well, it won't be covered by ARPA funds. So this is apt to be a recurring cost in time for the town. Or do you think this may be subject to some of the funds we get from the state for the Jitney fund, for the Jitney buses? I guess you can't be a soothsayer, but just a question.
that's a really good question. I cannot say whether or not this particular van we would be able to purchase a new one with funds. And you're right, if it's a very popular and well-used service, we probably want to continue it, but I can get that information. I can confirm that.
Well, I'm sure nobody will confirm it, but maybe Sean
Well,
has
we
an
can
idea.
do some research.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's certainly not a reason for me to oppose it. I just know that sometimes you get the funding for something and then
And then the town
it's not
has to foot the
recurring.
bill.
It's not recurring and they wonder why no one asked why and whatever. So,
The only thing I could add, Mr. Chairman, just briefly, is that this is an opportunity to try again this different style of vehicle. There are occasions where, and certainly when we had ridership was down during COVID, but it's certainly coming back. But there are some appointments where only 1 or 2 people are being taken by these larger buses to out of town appointments. This would seemingly, from a gas standpoint and also just sort of ease and comfort standpoint, might be a more appropriate vehicle for some of those out of town trips. So we may find that these are better vehicles to replace the next Jitney bus, depending on how, balancing between, obviously there's plenty of events that we use the larger buses for, but it may be the case that it's not an addition to the other 4, but maybe we have a fleet of 2 and 2, or depending on the operations there. But certainly something that Stephanie and Michelle Picarella could give us some more information on their projections.
thank you for that.
And I would imagine these are more efficient to run, probably a little better gas mileage, so they might have a little lower costs rather than taking the big bus. All right, other questions or comments? Which Budget Committee member would like to move to recommend this to the full council?
I'll move it.
Your turn, John. All right, Jim, second.
Second.
All right, sensing we've discussed this enough, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Passes with a unanimous vote. And the last item on the agenda, authorization to apply for an acceptance of an appropriation of the Connecticut State Library 2024 Historic Document Preservation Grant for document imaging. This is something we routinely receive. It's $8,000 to help us keep up with the imaging of records, and it certainly makes them more available, not only for preservation, but for citizens to see online and all that. Any further amplification, Sean or Arnett? Are there questions from Budget Committee
No,
members?
Just,
No.
yeah, just what you
Sure.
said that it's an annual application and
Yeah.
and that just noting that this is a request to both apply and appropriate it, so we don't have to come back. A second
Right.
time.
Okay,
And I would like to add that we are getting very, very close to getting back to volume one. So that we may not get it with this round, but maybe perhaps with the next round. Even all those all the books with the spidery handwriting for the land records will actually be imaged and saved and accessible.
wow. All right. Are there questions or comments? And who would like to move that we recommend this to the full council?
I'll move that.
All right, seconded by
I will second it.
Scott. All right, sensing you're ready to vote, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. All right, we are at adjournment. Who would like to move that?
I'll move that.
All right, seconded by Jim. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All right, Budget Committee is adjourned. Mr. Mayor, you have 1 minute. We'll give you
Well,
the
I
first-
must say off the record, because we're not in the new meeting, that's a very efficiently run meeting. I appreciate that. I'll do my best to follow suit.
Just a point of order, Mr. Chairman, I know we just had a discussion on the approval of the tax refunds. Do you need Anne Marie to stay for the rest of the meeting, or does everyone
I
feel like
was-
they had their?
I was
Uniquely
certainly,
had-
I was certainly going to ask that question, Sean. I think it's a fair and reasonable one, especially for Anne Marie. If you want to do that now, before our meeting, we can do that. Anyone feel you need questions of Anne Marie regarding that motion that comes before us tonight? Well, Anne Marie, it looks like you're on your own. You've got the rest of your evening. And thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Perfect. I think it's now 7 o'clock. I will commence the town council meeting of Tuesday, March 14th at 7 o'clock. We've done the roll. However, the new roll will indicate that Sylvia's been able to join us. And welcome, Sylvia. I know you joined midway, but your name may not have been indicated for the record. We also have with us for a little bit later in time, Richard Gussenberg. He'll speak about the school stuff. Obviously, Jeff D'Onofrio has joined us for the regular meeting. We've done the roll. We did the pledge. And now for any public comments. Do we have any, Arnett?
We do not have any public comments at this time.
Okay, very good. Then I will call for an approval of the minutes of February 14th, 2023 regular town council meeting.
So moved.
We have a motion from, I believe that was Mr. Walsh. I don't know who seconded. If you'll just speak to it, so it's recorded. Thank you, Mr. Talbot. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor signify or call out. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously of those present. Okay, we now move to consent. Mr. Veliver. Oh, no, Mr. Bowery, excuse me.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Be it resolved that the town council approves resolution 031423-1, the consent calendar for March 14, 2023.
We have a motion. We have a second. Thank you,
Second.
Mr. Veliver. Consent calls for no discussion, so all in favor signify, please. All those in favor. Motion carries unanimously of those present. For the record, that would be 8. We now move to items removed from consent, and there aren't any, so we quickly pass along to old business. Under old business, we have the Bartlam Park South update. This is probably a quick recap of our vote of the other night. And with that, we can go to either John Mylone or town manager, whoever wants to speak to it.
Mr. Chair, I have no update, so, Sean,
Any
if you have
talkers?
anything to add?
Only that, yeah, as the chairman indicated, we have, the council supported the award of bid last week. We have been in discussions with Dorita to finalize the contract as recently as earlier this afternoon. planning a pre-construction meeting. Also, just so the council's aware, I'm waiting to hear back from Weston and Sampson with respect to their proposal for construction administration services. So I'll be looking for that, probably tacked onto a budget committee meeting in the future once we have a direction to go with respect to that. So no other update there, but once we have that in order, we'll be ready to hit the ground running. And again, in the coming weeks, once I have more information with respect to the schedule, I'll of course be sharing it. And we are working, I know Arnett and Noel are starting a little dedicated page of projects around town, frankly, to include also links to the school building committee project and also eventually road paving. But we're going to have a page dedicated on the website that folks can go to and get updates as to the plans for Bartlam Park, consistent with the council's request last week, and associated press releases and social media that things are kicking off here in the coming weeks. So we'll be looking for that in the coming days.
Any questions for the town manager? Okay, well, seeing none, we would now move to the school building committee update. But since primarily that can be resolved under item A, I'm going to introduce Rich Gussenberg, who's chairman of the illustrious building group that managed to cobble together and come up with a momentous decision. He's going to give us a little background on the process, which I think is important for everyone here to understand. I know in our packets we had some general information, but no one could probably embellish it more than Rich Gussenberg. And also I would hasten to add that Jeff D'Onofrio provides input that's important to the group. So if we have questions, they can be directed at Jeff as well. And of course, Sean is our ex officio and really voting member representing the council as far as I'm concerned. So with that, welcome, Rich. And you may be muted.
Unmute. There we go. All right. Thank you, Tim, and thank you, members of the council. We've been hard at work over the last couple of months, and I know sometimes it's hard to see that because a lot of it's going on behind the scenes. People who are waiting for the walls to go up. We've got, quite a bit of time before that happens. I'm going to start off today. Our major focus is on the architectural choice of architects, the process that we followed, and our recommendation. And I'm going to start off, if I could, by asking our attorney, Jeffrey D'Onofrio, if he would walk through with the council a little bit on the state regulations and procedures. He's been giving us a great deal of support and help through this process. And most of what we talk about today is going to be based on those state regulations. So, Jeff, let me turn it over to you for a couple minutes, if you would.
Sure. The process with respect to hiring an architect, a construction manager, an owner's representative, and all other vendors that the town will procure directly, which would be a commissioning agent, a special inspection professional, a testing lab, a third-party peer review, a structural engineer, is mandated by statute. And the process essentially consists of two components. The first is a request for qualifications. So with respect to the architect and with respect to every other professional the town will procure directly, the town issues a request for qualifications, inviting firms that possess the qualifications and experience that are identified in the RFQ to submit a statement of qualifications. We then review the statements of qualifications to make sure that the minimum requirements of the RFQ are in fact met by the statement of qualifications. If they are, we proceed to the committee scoring each of the firms that have submitted statements of qualifications and have been deemed to meet those minimum criteria in the RFQ. And then by statute, from that group and after the scoring, the committee can select a pool of not more than 4 responsible qualified proposers. And that list, whether it's 4, 3, 2, or 1, with respect to the architect, it was 4 of each, then is sent an RFP, a request for proposals. The request for proposals asks about project approach, organizational and team structure, oversight capabilities, past performance, including adherence to project schedule and budget and quality requirements, and other relevant information for a Connecticut school construction project receiving a state grant. In a separate envelope, the town received a proposal and a fee proposal. So two separate envelopes. The fee proposal does not get opened until after the building committee completes its interviews and scores all but price for each of the firms that submit a proposal. With respect to the procurement of the architect, the building committee checked references and visited representative projects prior to the interview, conducted the interview of each of the firms, and Rich will get into detail on that, over a span of 2 nights, and then using a scoring tool that was developed prior to the interviews on a weighted criteria basis, scored all but price, and then of course price gets opened and just gets plugged in. So that's the same statutory procurement process for every vendor that the town is going to procure directly. The trade contractors, the folks actually doing the physical labor and building the school, don't get procured by the town. They get procured by the construction manager, who right now the town is in the process of procuring. The RFQ is on the street and statements of qualifications will be due later this month. But that's, in a nutshell, the statutory process. It's been the process for 15 years, and we'll be sure that we follow it very closely and create a nice audit trail so that several years from now, when the project is successfully complete and the state does their grant audit, we'll have all our I's dotted and our T's crossed for the auditor.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. With that in mind, I'm going to hopefully get us up and running here. I knew this could be a problem. Let's see.
Rich, I have what you sent me too, if it's easier for me to share it. Just
It
let me
might
know.
be, because when I go to share, I'm not seeing the file. So I want to
All
see.
right, if
the-
it hasn't changed from what you sent, I think you
No, it
forwarded
hasn't
yesterday.
changed since we
Okay.
talked.
So the one labeled architect presentation?
Yeah,
or-
that's what I want first.
Okay, all right, I'll open that right now. Is that coming through?
There we go. Yeah.
All right, just let me know when you want to advance it.
Okay. So I'm going to walk you through mostly what Jeff just walked us through, telling us a little bit about the procedure, but I'll give you a little more input on it and a little more detail as we go. So go ahead, Sean. The RFQ was sent out on January 9th, and companies were given 2.5, 3 weeks to respond to it. We had 12 firms who submitted detailed responses. All of them submitted a response for each of the 2 schools. So we had 24 booklets in total, 24 responses that we received. Sean, go ahead. Committee members read and evaluated all 24 of these. They were pretty extensive. They included in each case a firm profile. Sean, go ahead. Description of the previous completed projects. A proposed project team for each of the schools. Some put the same team down for both. Some recognized that they were right up from the beginning looking to garner both schools and therefore had separate teams. Detailed bios of each of the major people in that would be working on the project, including some of their subcontractors and others that they would be bringing into the process. Sean, go ahead. And their design approach. How do they work with us? What is their philosophy of their company? What are they hoping to accomplish over the next several years, actually? Sean? On February 2nd, the committee went through. We chose 4 well-known architectural firms We asked each to submit detailed proposals related to the two schools. The four firms were, very good ones, and we were very pleased with that choice. Go ahead, Sean. And as they went through they then submitted some more details specific to our program. That included a timeline, which they saw for completing these two schools. Sean? A project approach for each of the schools. This one is a picture of one of the ideas around Norton School and what would be entailed there. Go ahead. And this one is the same thing, only for the North End School. So they're looking at the site, they're looking at some of the history of the town and how it could apply to each of the schools. They're looking for how the buildings might be sited on the sites, all preliminary, obviously. Sean? On February 15th, 22nd, 23rd, 24th, and 25th, the committee members did site visits to 8 different schools, 2 for each architectural firm. Several of the companies commented to us that they were not normally given the opportunity at this phase to show off some of the buildings that they've done and to really work in detail with us. They were very pleased that we were able to do this. It obviously was a lot of time and effort on the part of committee members, some of them were working full time and yet made time to come out on multiple days to go to these school visits. The school visits often lasted 3 hours or more as we walked through the schools, talked to the design teams. Sean? 2 purposes. I mean, going to the schools allowed us to see some of the design work that they've done in the past. But just as important, it gave us an opportunity to, on a very informal basis, get to know the design team, get to talk to them about work that they've done in the past. In some cases, some ideas and concepts that they had for our schools. As we walked through the buildings that they were showing us, they often would compare the facilities that we were looking at compared to what we were looking to do in Cheshire in our ed specs and that sort of thing. Size of classrooms, storage, gymnasiums, all those kinds of things. So it was an extremely valuable time. I know I walked away feeling that I got a lot of good ideas for design when we do sit down with the architects. Sean? So, this is just a picture of a couple of the buildings that we took a look at. During that side, and I wanted to just show you a little bit, we saw buildings that were actually in construction, and we saw buildings that were completely finished. And as I said, the group really took us through highlighting some of the work that they had done in the past. And we looked at everything. We looked at the function of the buildings. We often had principals of the schools with us. We sometimes had people who were in charge of their building committees. We had CMs as we walked through. At the same time that we were doing all of the site visits, we also had people who were checking references for each of the 4 firms. And at the suggestion of our attorney, we focused very much on talking to people who were in charge of the building committees for many of the buildings that we were looking at or that had been done by these architectural firms in the past. And those were very, very valuable pieces of information that we gathered. On February 28th and March 1st, the committee interviewed the team for each of the 4 firms. They presented their design ideas for our projects, and they responded to our questions. When the interviews were concluded and each firm was evaluated by each member of the Next Generation School Building Committee, price proposals were opened and reviewed at that time. The interviews, once again, each firm was given an hour. to present ideas specific to our project. They talked a little bit about their corporation, their firm, a little bit about specifics to each of our sites, some of the vision that they had for the buildings that we might be doing. Brought their whole team in so that they looked at all aspects, not just the building, but also the grounds and the buses and the parent drop off and all of that sort of thing, which was extremely valuable. And then we had about a half an hour for each group as a question answer. Again, a couple of the firms noted that they often had less than 20 minutes when they went to other school systems. So having an hour and a half to work with us and really have our group dig in. It took more time. It was, but this was a committee that was more than willing to take the time because they really wanted to make sure that we made this decision in a very thoughtful way. And I think, is that the last one there? No, we have one more. Based upon the totality of our work, the Next Generation School Building Committee at its meeting on March 9th unanimously voted to support Tecton architecture for both the Norton and North End schools. And we recommend them to you tonight. And I have one other short slideshow from Tecton that I asked them to provide for us so that you could get to know a little bit about their firm before your vote tonight. So this was provided by the Tecton Architectural Company. And Sean, go ahead. So this is a company that's been around for a while, 44 years. They have over 50 people working there, 90% repeat clients. They do a lot of K through 12 projects, over 100 of them. Their design team, we went to 2 different schools with them. Spent a lot of time. One school in Brookfield is a school that is going to include 1,200 pre-K through 5th grade students. It is in construction now. It'll be opening in September. Some of the areas, or a lot of the areas, particularly the classroom wings, were basically all done. Carpeting, everything was finished. Some of the other areas, the cafeteria, gym, library, were still in construction. But we got a chance to see the innards and we got a chance to see the finished product. We then went over to Oxford Middle School, a school that's been open for a few years now, and again saw a vision of a nicely designed, clean building, a place that was bright and open and something that looked really nice. Go ahead. This is a picture at the top of the new school in Brookfield that is going to open, but there's also a listing here of some of the other schools that that they have done. Sean? And again, the Brookfield School, one of the things that really grabbed our attention, they worked with the staff, worked with the community, and they put together a theme that ran through the entire building. And you can see, some of those themes under each of the grade levels up above, and then how that translates into some of the color combinations, the kind of carpeting that they picked, even the flooring that's in the hallways. And so it made for a very unique and thoughtful experience for the children. One of the things that we really liked about Tecton was the fact that they did their homework on us. They spent a fair amount of time walking the sites, checking the area. They went onto our websites for each of the buildings and pulled out some of the key parts of our philosophies and said, this is what Cheshire is all about. And so as we go to design, we want to know, how do we make our designs consistent with what this town is? And so they looked at things like Lock 12. They looked at some of the farms that were in the area, things like that. Sean, the next one. And here, they talked about the actual design of the building, but how that building related to education and its impact on our students. That was different from some companies that focused very, very much on the the building itself. They were always talking about the instructional program. Sean? And again, there's two examples here. This one, they were looking at the way that you would design a building around a pre-K program and the kinds of things that young children grades or age 3, 4, 5 would need. The next slide, they did the same thing, only in this case, looking at the upper elementary and how that upper elementary school should look different and feel different as you're preparing our 6th graders to move on to the middle school. Sean? So if you look, they kind of went out, they took a look at some pictures. They said, okay, what is unique about the North End? We see the farms that are there. We see the fields that are there. What's unique about the Norton area? They looked at Lock 12. They looked at the trails that are there, the woodlands that are there. And then they started to just put together some very rough ideas and sketches, always noting that they would be coming back to the community and the staff with any ideas that they had. But this was all very preliminary. Sean? And again, this is, part of their process. They spent a fair amount of time talking about how they get together with community groups, how they get together with school staff people, and in the design work, making sure that they're getting lots of input as they're working on, the design that they're coming up with. Sean, next one. That in our interviews, they went from some very rough sketches of each of the sites and some of the constraints and possibilities in each site to the process where they also then began to look at what might the buildings look like for each of those places. Go ahead, Sean. And, those are same thing. Sean, go ahead. And as they were looking, as you can see, just some really rough ideas. Here's, you could have a pod, a wing for a grade level that had worked around the theme of a farm, Bishop Farms, Risco Farms, things like that. You could take a look at some of the historical people in town. A lot of ideas, a lot of good ideas, none of it finalized in any way, but built around us and who we are as a school system. And same thing over at Norton. And go ahead, Sean. And that's it. So based on that, the committee took a look at each of the 4 firms when we were all done doing the interviews. Each committee member did an evaluation of those 4 firms. We came together as a group, and Tecton was our very clear #1 firm. And then, as Jeff noted, the pricing was opened up, plugged into our process, and at the end, the committee had a unanimous vote to hire Tecton. And I know you have seen the price quotes and the resolution from our group. So let's turn it back to you at that point.
Well, thank you, Richard. That was excellent presentation. I know my colleagues may certainly have some questions, and I'd like to open it up to any specific questions to this big decision we're making. Mr. Walsh.
Thank you. And thank you, Richard, your group. I know you guys have been doing quite a bit. I thought we had a lot of meetings, but you guys are running neck and neck with us with the amount of meetings we're having. And I appreciate all the hard work you guys.
We don't really want to win that competition.
I know. I'm sure you don't. But, yeah, I do like the idea of having the one architect for the two buildings. I think it was a smart move. I did notice by doing that, we're saving, it looked like we're saving $200,000 by having the two, is that correct? By having one architect do the two?
We asked each of the architects to give us two different prices for each building. One if they were given the building as the only project, and one if they were given both. And yes, Tecton basically reduced, I don't have the exact number in front of me, but they reduced their fee by over $200,000 by being granted the two buildings instead of what their price would have been individually for each of the buildings. And coming back to the original comment on, the committee spent a fair amount of time talking about, do we want two architects, two architectural firms, or one firm? And, they went through the pros and cons of both. We really felt this is a town that wanted to make sure that they were getting comparable facilities as they're building two schools at one time, and that by having a single architectural firm working on both, we could make sure that we had not exact buildings. We want them to look different. We want them to feel different, but that the people who move into those buildings will know that they're comparable, that they're, each end of town got very similar materials. And I think even for some of the maintenance issues, things like that, that we would ensure that a lot of the materials are the same, the HVAC systems, things like that, so that it will in the long run save us some maintenance problems and costs.
And I appreciate that fact. I think that's important, but I also like the idea that how they are looking at the different areas, and that's how they're going to integrate different looks of the schools, like the farms from one end versus the trails and woods for the other. I think that's a great concept, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what types of plans they can come up with. So I appreciate you guys really looking into that and spending all the time you did. And
because the sites,
travel.
because the sites are so different, you're going to end up with two different looking buildings anyway. But we definitely want to tie into the uniqueness of each area of town as we look to do the initial design.
Thank you.
Ms. Nichols.
Thank you, Mr. Slocum. First, I apologize for my tardiness this evening. And second, I would like to say that as much as I enjoy all of our meetings, I also followed along on Zoom with your school meetings because I've been involved in it since the beginning. And I am excited about the fact that I see an architectural firm that you've chosen based on facts, based on knowledge of their abilities and their qualifications. But I'm also impressed that this does not appear to be a project that is being done for the architectural reward, but is being done to meld with the community's ideas and pay attention to the vibe that we have in Cheshire and the students, as well as the physical building of the plant. So I think that's very important. And I think that's very important for the people in town who are going to be watching and participating in the project to realize that they are paying attention to the individual people and students and teachers and staff and families that will be using the school. So I think that's very important. I'm impressed with the organization of your meetings. I've sent you notices along the way after meetings. I think the commitment of all of the members of that committee is impressive, to be putting in all of this time and thoughtful consideration. I watched as you decided and went through your ratings and all of that and discussed the reasons why people had the feelings that they did. So I'm very impressed, and I'm very confident that the work of this committee will result in a successful project. I'm excited to see what happens. It's been a long time coming, but I think it's a good start. And I hope we continue the enthusiasm as we get into the real nitty-gritty about the actual construction people that are being hired and the engineers and all of that. So thank you all for your time and energy. I'm pleased with your choice.
Thank you, Sylvia. Sylvia and I were on the visitation committee for school modernization. So I thought of you a lot as we were going around to the different buildings, but
I wished I'd been there. I couldn't tag along, but I would have loved to have been there.
we would have loved to have you. But every time you go to these schools, you do walk away with some new ideas. So it just added to what we had already done for school modernization.
Anyone else? Mr. Talbot?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Rich, thank you to you and your committee for, and I'll continue to say this as you continue to give us updates, but you certainly deserve the thanks for the work that you and your group are putting in. The Tecton presentation was extremely impressive. No question that they appear to be a very good fit with the community, and certainly glad that your committee recommended. No specific question for you, but if I can impose on my colleague, Mr. Milone, and our town attorney, Mr. D'Onofrio, just do you have any professional knowledge, or have you worked with Tecton, and just any comments that you'd like to make?
Well, I will speak briefly. We have worked with Tecton. I will say for full disclosure that our firm was providing sub-consultant services to a couple of the firms that were being considered, but not Tecton, but that's fine. I'm no longer an owner in the firm, so I don't see any conflict there. And I did not participate in any way with this because I wanted to make sure that that was hands off. But the work we've done with Tecton has been excellent. I know they have an excellent reputation, and I'm very satisfied with them. Any of the four firms were really all well qualified. I think the committee's done an excellent job in finding the best among the best in Connecticut, and doing a thorough job. So I'm going to support the selection of Tecton. Rich, I think your committee did an excellent job, very thorough. I did have one question though, and I think the fees seem, I don't know what the other firm's fees were, and I don't think that's really important. I think the fees seem very competitive. I just was curious, just a clarification, did the fees include surveying, traffic engineering, and soil borings? Because I didn't see them in the exclusions or in the lump sum, so I just wanted to make sure that those were covered somewhere in the selection. Those are not big items. They wouldn't be a game changer, but maybe just some clarification before you enter into a formal agreement with the firm.
The traffic study is an add-all. The geotech is additional, would be an additional service if the town decides they want to have the architect carry that. I don't think the committee's talked about that. And what was the third scope, John?
A survey of the property.
Yeah, that's part of the basic fee.
It's not, okay. I didn't see it in there. It wasn't specifically noted in the scope. Might want to just get that clarified, and probably get fees for the traffic and soil borings before you go forward. You're going to need soil borings, or you can't really design the project. So just minor items, just to make sure we have those covered. But I'm fully satisfied with Tecton. As I said, I will support their selection tonight, because I think the committee did an excellent job and they're highly qualified.
Peter, to answer your question, I've worked with all these firms. I thought when we got the 12 responses to the statement of qualifications, my comment to the building committee was that there was no firm in Connecticut doing good school design work that did not submit on Cheshire. So I was very pleased that we had all the major players. I thought that, getting from 11 down to 4 was difficult, but the statute says that you can have no more than 4. And a lot of thought and effort went into getting down to 4. And as John said, I think any of the 4 firms are capable of doing a really nice job for the town. Really what it comes down to is how the team meshes, and the experience of not only the Tecton personnel, but their consultants, who are very important and critical to the project. I think the building committee took that into consideration as well. Things like the MEP consultant, for example, and the qualifications of their personnel, all of whom were in attendance at the interviews. So, I think Tecton's well suited to do a fine job. And I think it really comes down to putting the team together and, making sure that everybody has realistic expectations in terms of the fact that there will be challenges on the projects, and, having a team that you can work with makes a big difference in how you manage those challenges.
Thank you, Rich. Thank you, John and Jeff, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, good one, Peter. Anyone else? We've got Dave Bowery, Jim, if you had anything, Mr. Veliber, you have something.
Yeah, just a quick question. I know, and maybe John alluded to this, and I was going to ask this question. Obviously, we've seen the bids or the prices for using Tecton. And first off, I want to start by echoing the other comments. I think your committee has done a great job. Thank you for all the work that you have done. I think you've brought us a great potential architect for these buildings, and we're all looking forward to seeing what they put forward. I guess my question is, from a pricing standpoint, from a bidding standpoint, do we know what those, can we know what those prices are? Do we have an idea like how these prices came to be, from the bids, as far as, where does Tecton fall in terms of, their bids versus other bids? Does it make a difference? So
those prices were all opened in open session.
Right.
They're fully available to everyone. Those numbers were then inputted into our evaluation process, which included 65% based on the site visits, the reference calls, the interviews, the analysis of the company. That was 65%. 35% was the cost estimates, which were plugged in together, and Tecton came out heads and shoulders above every other company. I don't have the numbers right in front of me at the moment, but they are there. They are fairly similar. You're not going to find a huge difference between them. Tecton was at the top or near the top in each of the quotes that they gave us. But as I said, that wasn't the overriding piece of the evaluation. It was a substantial part, 35%, but it wasn't the only thing.
Okay, thank you very much. I just wanted to make sure, for my own mind, I wanted to make sure where they stood in that, because it sounds like everything that you presented looks great. I just wanted to make sure there wasn't a vast disparity between the, and for the public to understand, there isn't a vast disparity from a cost perspective. So at this point, for the most part, we're really going on who do we think has the best vision and can get this project done. Thank you.
But as I said, those quotes are available to you with all of the prices that are there. And then we even went through after the fact and did an analysis of each one to make sure that we were completely comparing apples to apples. If one company, didn't, include something or included something that we hadn't seen, we wanted to make sure that the price quotes were exactly the same. We're very, very pleased. Tecton was right there based on our evaluative process.
Thank you very much.
To my colleagues, Bowery and Jim, do you have questions before I weigh in?
Jim, did you
Jim
want to go
Jenks.
first?
You're muted, Jim.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I don't really have any questions. I just wanted to kind of echo what everyone else has said about the committee's work. Rich, thank you very much. Please extend our thanks to the committee for all the time you guys put in. 12 or 24 submissions is quite a bit of work to go through and narrow that down. And I just want to say, again, thank you for all that. It looks like a very good submission. Hard to say from this vantage point, not having seen all the submissions, but certainly not going to second guess your committee in any way. And the expertise of John and Jeff here is very, very helpful and comforting to have, important to have for the council, I think. So those are the only comments that I have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for that. David.
And just briefly, thank you. Rich, thank you and your committee. I've been following them, as Sylvia has said, and I think most of us have on YouTube. And when I see that they're 2-hour meetings, plus I know you're having other meetings as well, and I listen to the whole 2 hours, and it's very interesting, and you learn a lot. But we learned that we have some great volunteer citizens, and you
It's a
guys have done
fantastic
super job.
committee, very diverse, which has been wonderfully helpful because we have people with tremendous broad knowledge sitting at the table.
Yeah, which is great. Just one aspect of this that I do want to also compliment on and let everybody know is, there's a preliminary budget for this $166 million. And there's a preliminary number for what architectural fees are expected to be, just as there is for every aspect of the project. And this comes in nicely under what was expected to be the number for architectural fees. Now, it's not done and it's preliminary, but it's certainly in the right direction. And it's certainly starting off on the right foot. And let's just hope the rest of the project and the other items and construction come in the same way when we're ready to go out to bid.
We're going to work very hard to make that happen.
Yes, exactly. You are, and I know you will. And I just gladly support this.
Okay, colleagues, thank you very much. Rich, that brings me to the fore now. And I know for a fact that the Town Council and Board of Education, had they been given the opportunity, the responsibility, and the time, it never could have happened, even with the help of Jeffrey D'Onofrio and other important folks. This committee is obviously extremely necessary. They're extremely focused, and I'm sure will continue to remain focused, and I thank you and them for that. There's one observation I made and mentioned at your meeting when you made your selection. And for me, the reason I raised the question or the comment was because it demonstrated in my eyes how attentive you were to your process. And that was that when you had the RFQs and you were narrowing down to 4 selections, which is difficult when you've got 12 to start with, there was a debate between 4 and 5 that really went on in public session, and it was very interesting. And Tecton was selected as the 4th in. And so for me, that meant that 3 before them were easy pickings. And I can't say for certain that they were, but it would be my guess they were in easily for consideration. So kudos for that. I know nothing else about the firm. What I would like to state, though, however, is being a resident of Cheshire for 67 years, I don't think the town is famous for having designed and developed beautiful buildings. And I say that out of affection for the town, not criticism for the budgets and or the architects and or their selections. I think our town hall, which was built in a matter of 6 months, 100 years ago or 150 years ago, is a fairly classic building, but clearly not as classic as others and not bad. And I do think its addition was a nice job to adapt to that. But there are others that are just dogs. And I'll use my father's term. He was an architect. They're dogs. And this brings me to my final point, because it's the only time I get to say this. I don't think we need a classic Monticello type of building in town, but I don't think we need the Starship Enterprise. And that's what schools have become in many eyes over the last number of years. So to my point, precisely, is that I would love to have beautiful buildings in the town of Cheshire that people 50 years from now think are beautiful and functional, because we know that these schools have to last 50 to 75 years, perhaps longer, because that's what will happen. I have no other place to say that but to you. My eyes are on the design, but I do think buildings that'll last and aren't cookie cuttered into the 2020s, are buildings that I would love, because we actually see them from the outside and often from the inside too. It is all about the kids, but look how our kids have changed too over time. So all of that, all of those have to go into the considerations in my estimation. And without saying much more to that point, I thank you for your efforts. Your committee has been extraordinary. I know they will exceed the hours the council spends on budgets and other things in a calendar year. It's going to be busy for you guys, and I greatly appreciate it, and I certainly support your selection.
Thank you. Thank you. I
So-
will make sure the committee hears all the kind words that have said. They have worked extremely hard. As I said, there's a wonderful group. We have recommendations coming to you very soon on an owner's rep and on a CM at large. Then hopefully we're going to be off and running. So we'll be talking to you quite often.
Well, thank you for that. You may want to hang around for the vote. We do have a motion to put into place. And with that, Mr. Walsh, I will ask you to introduce motion A for the appointment of an architect.
Thank you, Chair. Be it resolved that town council approves resolution number 031423-2. Be it resolved that pursuant to the final selection of the next generation school building committee, the town council hereby awards the contract for architectural engineering services for the new Norton Elementary School construction project to Tecton Architects in the base amount of $3,545,089 as detailed in the fee proposal. And be it further resolved that pursuant to the final selection of the next generation school building committee, the town council hereby awards the contract for architectural engineering services for the new North End Elementary School construction project to Tecton Architects in the base amount of $4,109,640 as detailed in the fee proposal. And be it further resolved that the town manager is authorized to execute the contract pursuant to these awards and the town bid documents upon the approval by the town attorney as to form and legal sufficiency.
Second.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Talbot. Any further discussion on this? Because certainly there can be. There's no reason if you just thought of something else. Seeing none, I would just like to ask a question of Jeff. Obviously, Tecton's been advised they were selected. They know there's a vote tonight. Where does that leave us with drawing up a contract, getting it signed? What's the short extension of this process as far as getting them on board with us?
Contracts are done and they're provided to the town to send to Tecton with the award letter.
Okay. So that was essentially done prior to the vote, or is that
Nope.
after the vote?
Nope,
Okay.
after the vote.
So they're simply in unsealed envelopes without the stamp. Okay. And I can't imagine I have another question except maybe one more for Rich. I know you guys are working on the construction manager or the guy who's our guy, basically. The guy who's owner's rep. I forgot the terminology for a moment. And you will be making a selection through a process which you think is going to be a little more seamless. There's only 4 applications, I believe.
Yeah.
You have to make some, obviously, interviews, but probably not a whole lot of field trips. And I'm not rushing. Do whatever you want. But when do you expect to be bringing that to the council? And how are you on your timeline at this point?
We're running at or ahead of the timeline that had been laid out before we became a committee. We are in the process of reading the 4 submissions that we got from the RFQ on owner's rep. We'll be meeting this Thursday, 2 days from now, to determine which of those firms, again, as Jeff noted earlier, by state regs, it can be anywhere from 1 to 4. So we could keep all 4, or we could reduce that number. They will be asked through an RFP to give us some additional information. We'll be doing some interviews, and I anticipate that that decision will be coming by mid-April. And then the CM at risk is running right behind that, about a week to a week and a half behind that. So our goal is by the end of April, we will have chosen all three of the major components that we need to be off and running to begin the design work.
Okay. So just further me in the process as a reminder, we have our owner's rep, which I think we all understand. A firm is going to be looking out for our best interests as this unfolds. Construction manager does what? He oversees the ultimately hired building firms.
Yeah, and you know, Attorney D'Onofrio could probably go much more into the details, but he's someone who's got kind of a foot in both places. He works for us, but he's the one who goes out and gets all of the subs and oversees the actual construction. Very involved working with the architects on the costing as the design is done. So that we make sure that there are several stopping places as we go along to make sure that the design is going to be done in a way that is within our budgetary constraints, and then works with the architect, works with the owner's rep for any pre-purchasing or any other things that we can do that will make sure that the project's going to move ahead on schedule and under budget. But Jeff, I don't know if you want to jump in with more than that.
Yeah, I mean, the project delivery method is construction manager at risk. Schools don't get built with general contractor project delivery methods anymore. It really hasn't been the dominant method for 30 years. So as Rich indicated, the construction manager will be involved during the schematic design development, and construction documents phases, and will provide cost estimates at the end of schematic design, participate in value engineering, cost estimate at the end of design development, participate in value engineering, cost estimate at 50% construction documents, participate in the pre-construction, pre-bid meetings with OSCGR, structure bid packages so that if we have supply chain issues that we need to mitigate with some early bid packages like steel, do that kind of planning, and, then hold the trade contracts. They'll provide us with a guaranteed maximum price. The at-risk portion of the construction management at-risk delivery method refers to price and schedule. So we'll have a contract amendment after the bids are received where the construction manager commits to a guaranteed maximum price, which means that unless there are changes, that's the price. And there's a substantial completion date that they commit to it as well. And they're at risk, absent circumstances beyond their control, like owner-initiated delays or owner-initiated changes. They own the project. There's a lot of transparency in that method of contracting. OSCGR is very comfortable with it. It's become the dominant way that schools are built over the last 30 years. And they're really kind of responsible for making sure it gets built. The architect gives them a set of documents and says, here's our specs, here's our plans, go build it. And it's up to the CM to figure out how to do it.
Okay, that's terrific. So with that, just a projected schedule, our big vote meetings are typically the second Tuesday of a month. You aim to try and get this done in the first regular meeting in May, or is it more important to get one done before the other? Does it really matter at this stage? What do you think for planning purposes makes you more comfortable?
Well, we will move it as soon as we're ready, as soon as we have a name. I'm anticipating that, as I said, those decisions should be made by the end of April. Whether we would ask for a special meeting or wait until your May meeting, but we'd like to get people on board as soon as we can. So
okay,
I'll be back to you, and I think some of it's going to depend. We know that the owner's rep piece will move along quickly. We haven't yet received the RFQs on the CM at risk. So we don't know how many of those there'll be and how fast we can move that process. So we you know.
But certainly comfortably by our regular meeting in May, that's not an uncomfortable time frame if we end up there and if we end up doing 2 selections at the same time. I would
And that
imagine
is actually ahead of what the original timeline was that we were handed.
Right.
They had anticipated having all these people on board by June or July.
Well,
we'll
I
be
think
ahead of that.
I think to give you a comfort zone, I think that could be your target. And council is really busy. There's no way I'm pigeoning this into a budget meeting on a Wednesday evening. This is a full meeting conversation because it's so important to us. So just if you think in those terms and take the time necessary to do the best work you can do, and I know you want to anyway, you certainly have my blessing on that. So thank you very much. I know we still have a vote to take. I haven't forgotten. And if no one else, John Mylone has a question.
Just a very quick comment, and I know we want to get to the vote quickly, but Rich, as you go through, and I know you're already getting to the CM at risk selection, so you are moving quickly, in my opinion, so that's great. And maybe it's because it's my area of expertise, but notoriously the CM at risks are focused on buildings, and they don't pay a lot of attention to site work. And I've seen a lot of times where there are site issues that just were not focused on. I only ask that you ask those questions during the process of their experience and their commitment to overseeing the site work at the same level they focus on the building construction work. So.
All right. Fair point. And I can say when we interviewed architects, obviously that was a major focus of theirs. They recognized the wooded areas around Norton School and the community, the housing areas that are there. They recognize the very special site issues around the north end with the wetlands that are there, the river that's down there. And they went through a lot of that in our interviews. We'll make sure that the same thing happens as we do the design and as we get a CM. But yeah, we'll make sure that that's part of our conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Anyone else before we call for a vote? Okay, then I think it's ready to put this thing to bed and get started. All those in favor specify or say aye.
Aye.
Any nay, any abstaining? Hearing none, this vote passes unanimously of those present. For the record, that is 8 of us. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. Very, very much. Okay, we will now move to B, which is the approval of refunds for tax payments. And that will be my buddy, Chairman Bowery.
You had me wondering who was your buddy. Okay, thank you.
Well, you're all my buddies, but I couldn't remember your name. Things happen and I need a slow pause.
Just say, hey, you. Be it resolved that the town council approves resolution 031423-3. Be it resolved that the town council approves the tax refunds for overpayments as presented and attached.
Thank you for that. May I have a second? Thank you, Mr. Veliber.
Mr. Chairman, if I may briefly, this was a discussion item and we reviewed this at the budget committee meeting earlier. I think most of us were there as full council as well. And it is a fresh set of eyes with our new collector revenue that took.
Well, the good thing about Frozen is you usually catch up, but this one seems to be paused. Okay, he's probably in the waiting room by now. Are you back, Dave?
I think so. Am I?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know if I was
Okay.
the only one that couldn't hear. You know, I hate the
apologize.
Zoom stuff like everybody else.
I couldn't hear you too.
Okay. So with that, I think we are satisfied that there's no questions, but I will beg the question anyway. Does anyone have a further
Take my
question?
picture off, so maybe the volume is better.
Okay. Okay. I'll call for vote then. All those in favor signify.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimously of those present. That would be 8-0 for the record. We now move along to Mr. Bowery again. The reason I really have a problem here is I don't have this nice big dais in town hall to throw my paper on, so I'm piling it, and repiling it and everything else. This one is the acceptance and appropriation of $78,953 in ARPA funds from the Connecticut ADS ARPA Senior Center allocation to the Cheshire Senior Center. So with that, Mr. Bowery.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Be it resolved that the town council approves resolution 031423-4. Be it resolved that the town council authorizes the application for the town of Cheshire's portion the American Rescue Plan Act funds for distribution among Connecticut senior centers in the amount of $78,953 and further accepts and appropriates said $78,953 for senior center purchases of a handicap accessible minivan and technology upgrades and sound system.
Okay, we have a motion. Second, please. Ms. Nichols, thank you. Discussion if necessary. Any comments, any
Just briefly, I
questions?
think the motion is self-explanatory. I think we were all present earlier.
That's correct. Okay, any further questions?
Oh, I just have one quick
Mr.
question.
Veliver, yep.
Yep, and I didn't ask this in the budget committee, but I thought, little question is, this minivan, obviously, I think is going to be very helpful. I think it's going to be more versatile than the big, than the current vans are, especially if we're only moving one or two people at a time. But my question is, do we know, is this van like fitted out like some of these like handy vans where it's going to have the handicap, like the wheelchair, the little, that platform, the lift that folds out from the van so that a wheelchair can get on and lift them up into the van?
Yes, it will have exactly that,
Okay,
the lift.
thank you.
Perfect. Okay. With that uplifting answer, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Motion carries unanimously. That would be 8-0 for the record. We now follow along to D, the approval of policy regarding signage on public property. Mr. Veliver. Please unmute.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, this is an ordinance that.
Do you want to read the motion?
Yep. Be it
That's
resolved, the
perfect.
town council approves the resolution 031423-5. Be it resolved that the town council adopts the policy regarding placement of signs in public property and approves the associated application to place sign on public property and rights of way as presented and attached.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Talbot. Discussion, Mr. Veliver.
Thank you very much. We had some discussion. This is an ordinance that we had brought up, the Ordinance Review Committee had taken a look at, brought up at a prior meeting. And then it was sent back to ordinance just to take a look at it again. There were some questions raised. The committee did look at it and we sort of discussed it amongst ourselves there at the Ordinance Review Committee. And we did not come up with any significant changes to what had been presented at the last meeting. We did, again, this was designed for signage on public property, primarily including things like the linear trail. And so we had included some issues there where we had temporary signs could be placed on town properties with the exception of a few places at the town manager and with the permit to be issued by the town manager or his designee, most likely John Golick, but could be any depending on any other town employees, with exceptions for the interior of the linear trail, except excluding one temporary sign eligible for a permit at the intersection of the trail and the local roads. We also excluded any public safety or public works facility in town and any school property, as they would be under the jurisdiction of the Board of Education, and that no signage may be attached to existing permanent signage. And that came up because there was some discussion as to whether signs could be attached to some of the kiosks that are located on some of the public properties and along the trail. And the committee had some discussion of that, and we ultimately came to the decision that we did not think that temporary signage should be attached that would fall under this ordinance could be attached to the those kiosks. They would have to be sort of freestanding as designed here to either be an A-frame sign or a lawn style sign sort of stuck in the ground. But all of them, any approved sign would need to have a permit affixed to the sign as part of that process, and that would be issued by the town after using the application process as outlined in the attached to this ordinance. There's an application there that people could fill it out, say which parks, where they wanted these signs to be used, and then the town would have to approve each one of them. Potentially, someone could apply for multiple ones because they may want to have that sign in different parks, but they'd have to apply for each location or list a multiple location.
Thank you for that, Mr. Voliver. That was a very clear explanation, but certainly it could beg a question or two from my colleagues. Are there any? Mr. Walsh.
Yeah, I was part of this ordinance committee discussing this, and I apologize for not bringing this up there in one of our ordinance, but there was something I was thinking about earlier today. When we mentioned town property, does that also include the property between the road and the sidewalk that the town typically owns? So if somebody, a company puts a sign on that property, that land between the sidewalk and the street, does that still have to have the sticker as well?
Jeff, I assume
Are
you
you
mean like
talking about
along
a right of way?
Yeah, talk about the grass area between like the sidewalk and the street that the town typically owns, but yeah, you see a lot of signs along the roadway in that area, and from businesses and whatever.
We changed the title at the last meeting. We changed the title to application to place sign on public property and rights of way.
Rights of way, right.
Yeah,
So-
to clarify that it does apply to rights of way.
So that means that, for the public, they need to know that if a sign goes in front of their house, but in that little plot of land, it could be removed unless it has approval.
Right.
I just want to make sure that was.
May I ask a point of clarification?
Sure.
Since I have 1,000 neighbors with that strip of grass between the town-owned sidewalk that they maintain and the grass they mow and the street. So the grass they mow and the street, that little 3 or 4 foot strip, it is typically, is technically a town right of way.
Yes.
Is that what you're stating? And that obviously gives the town access to the sidewalks if they have to repair them or something like that?
Correct.
Okay. So it simply means that the public doesn't need any kind of permit to put anybody's sign other than those that exist, limiting the time for, say, a contractor who's, done this and done that, as long as they do it on the grassy portion, which is clearly their own. So that's a minor distinction, but a distinction. So that's essentially what's happening here, correct?
Right.
Right. I
Perfect.
mean, the signage on private property is regulated by the zoning regulations.
Exactly. And there are, limits on how long you can put up a contractor sign, with your permission. I don't know if it's 10 days or 2 weeks or whatever it is. So it's just simply taken care of with another regulation.
But that
Okay.
grassy area is right of way, correct?
Understood. I don't have a question with
okay.
that. I'm trying
Okay,
to
so-
make it
yeah.
clear that somebody doesn't think we just took their property.
Right.
Because as far as I'm concerned, if I got 4 feet of land in front of my sidewalk and it touches the street, that's my land. This is my land and not your land. And oh, by the way, the town agrees you when it's got to be mowed and everything else. So,
Right.
but understanding the distinction, that's what I appreciated the answer for. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, I think it's time to call for a vote on this. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, opposed? Motion carries unanimously of those present, 8-0 for the record.
Great.
Okay, we now move to E, the adoption of a draft new fair rent commission ordinance. And Mr. Veliber, you're up again.
Great. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And we're trying to clear the board for some new ordinances, which will be coming our way. So we're trying to keep these things moving. So I appreciate this. Again, be it resolved that pursuant to that the council approves resolution 031423-6. Be it resolved that pursuant to the recommendations of the ordinance review committee, the town council approves and adopts a fair rent commission ordinance as follows. And it's on our packet. I don't think we want to read this. We'll still be here tomorrow. So
Beyond the fact that this is effective on April 15th of 2023.
Second.
yes.
Okay. We had a second, but I heard it and didn't recognize a hand. Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As mentioned, we had this discussion. This ordinance came before the council at a prior meeting. There was some good discussion, some good feedback. As many of you know, this ordinance is one that's really being imposed upon us by the state of Connecticut with the recent change to the statutes. There are other municipalities that have had fair rent commissions for a significant amount of time, but in the legislature's infinite wisdom, they decided to now impose this upon municipalities of populations of more than 25,000. And as a result of that, we are now forced to adopt a fair rent commission, whether we like it or not, whether we want one or not. And so we are now, with a lot of great work from Attorney D'Onofrio, we have put together this ordinance. As I said, we had some discussion at our last council meeting regarding this one. And as a result of that, we went back to the Ordinance Review Committee. We discussed some of those concerns. I know Councilman Milone had some concerns, as well as Councilwoman Pavano had raised some issues. And so we had a meeting of the Ordinance Review Committee. John was nice enough to attend with us to give some feedback on his experience with that. And we also asked Jeff to try to incorporate some of the concerns into the wording of this ordinance to try to make it a little stronger and make it clear that what the ordinance was really, what this commission's focus and responsibilities really should be focused on. As a result of that, we added some language to section 1 to establish that the purpose of this commission is to regulate and eliminate excessive rental charges for residential properties within the town of Cheshire. We want to make sure that this is designed for excessive rental charges. And we also added the word excessive at the beginning of section 2. And we added a sentence at the end of the first paragraph of section 2 to make it clear that the commission's authority shall be over excessive rental charges, which are rental charges found to be harsh and unconscionable, which is a defined term, not over market rental rates, because we want to make sure that their focus is on they're not supposed to be regulating the market rate, just making sure that a particular property is not harsh and unconscionable. The commission does not have any jurisdiction to award a complainant or respondent with monetary damages. We want to make sure that this is only about adjusting rent. This is not something that they can get monetary awards for. We also added in section 3 a provision that at least one member shall be a tenant and at least one member shall be a landlord, in order to provide some of that the wisdom and knowledge of a landlord and a tenant onto the commission. And we also raised in that last, we also discussed the issue. There's some discussion of whether we should have staggered terms. The committee decided that staggering those terms was not necessary. These are not elected officials and they are appointed by the council. So as a result, I was already thought that keeping them having just 2-year terms was sufficient. And finally, we did go through some of the language of the things which determine excessive rent, but most of that is determined by statute, as Jeff had very thoroughly discussed in our ordinance review committee, that some of these things are really coming straight from the statute. But we did also include a provision that the Fair Rent Commission is unable to accept excessive rent complaints if landlords have already commenced a summary process eviction against the specified tenant. And the reason for that is we don't want to have concurrent jurisdiction. If there's already pending litigation on this eviction in the Superior Court, it should stay in the Superior Court and deal with it there and not have concurrent jurisdiction. And with those are the primary changes that we asked that had come up in our last discussion. We addressed them at the Ordinance Review Committee. And so now we've brought this amended ordinance back to the council for hopefully adoption.
Well, thank you for that, Mr. Veliber. I know you spent quite a lot of time, you and the committee and town attorney and all. And before I ask a few questions, are there any of my colleagues that have a question for Mr. Veliber? Mr. Malone.
Thanks, Tim. I just wanted to make a couple of statements. First of all, I wanted to thank the ordinance committee and David for allowing me to participate in this. And while I will be voting for it, I feel disappointed that the state mandated this, and not only mandated it, but didn't really carefully word this. So we've got legislative requirements here that I think are just unclear and can cause confusion. That having been said, I think we've done a good job to try and make it as clear as possible, and I appreciate our efforts in that regard. So I will vote for it, but disappointed to have to vote for it still.
Anyone else? Okay, I have a couple of things. I know this policy is effective in April. I believe the 15th was tagged onto the bottom of that long, lengthy motion. That makes it somewhat incumbent upon us to appoint 5 members from the community by the terms prescribed in the ordinance. We got to get it done. So I think the most appropriate board to make this recommendation, or committee to make this recommendation to the town council, sits with you, David Veliber, and your committee. So whatever process is designated, as far as, I don't know if we put an ad in the paper, or I don't know how the process is deemed to be the most appropriate. And I'm sure Jeff D'Onofrio can help us in that matter, or help you guys in that matter. But rather than waiting until the referral, I figured this was a forum to talk about it. Number one, to see if someone strongly disagreed with me on that, because I'm welcome to disagreement. So I just think that's the next step that need to be taken. So what do you think, David?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And that's a great idea. One of the things I have a question, Jeff, when do we have to have this in place by? Is it June, July?
July 1st.
All
Okay,
right.
why did, then if it's effective, that means they've got 2 months to whine, or we collect complaints over 2 months, if there are any at all?
Well, you can make it effective prior to July 1. You're not legally required to have it in place until July 1. So
Okay.
My suggestion would be to move that April 15th date out to give yourself enough time to appoint the
Perfect.
proper people.
Okay, now we've all voted on something, so if we need a motion to amend and
We
vote
haven't voted on
again-
it
You
yet.
haven't
so-
voted on it. Yeah.
Oh, gee, I spent so much time talking and listening. That's fine. So we haven't voted on it. So would you accept that amendment?
Absolutely. So yeah, Tim, I thought that's a great thought on this as far as that could. So instead of April, if we amend the resolution to now say they shall go into effect on what, June 30th?
Sure.
June 30th.
Okay.
So we can have, well, Jeff, a good question. Do we have to adopt this by them, or do we have to have it constituted by July 1st?
Well, it has to be, the ordinance has to be in place by July 1st.
Yep.
And we have to send a copy of it to the state by that date. I'm not going to say that it has to be constituted by July 1st, but
Yeah, that
certainly a reasonable period of time after the adoption of the ordinance.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we didn't have to have somebody ready to go.
No,
which case-
it just has
yeah.
to be adopted.
Okay.
But on a referral basis, I could certainly get them started. That doesn't
Right.
change because we just changed the effective date. Am I correct on that?
Right.
Okay.
We
So
can
this way
start
we can-
working.
Exactly, because everything takes time in the middle of everything else. So, Okay.
All right.
So we have that slight amendment to the motion that was made. Unless there's any further discussion, I need a second on that slight amendment. Thank you for that, Mr. Walsh. I think we're ready to call for a vote on this. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so I also approve, and we'll vote for this reluctantly.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I think we're all in the same boat as far as we're voting for it, because we have to. So thank you.
Yeah, this is just like everything else, and these idiots up in Hartford, and I will put this on the record, are talking about controlling rent. They're debating that topic. Maybe that won't get out of committee, but oh well, they'll make the world better eventually. So with that, I now move to the authorization to participate in PowerSmart campaign. Sylvia, this was my assignment to you. I'm not sure you got it since you were unable to
I did.
be with our meeting. Are you okay with this? You're comfortable?
Yep, I just.
Thank you so much then.
Quick enough in the traffic and the weather and all sorts of.
I know. Well, thank you so much. If you could
So
enter
let's
that motion.
Be it resolved that the town council approves resolution 031423-7. Be it resolved that the town council approves the town of Cheshire's participation in the PowerSmart campaign for energy storage as recommended by the Energy Commission. And be it further resolved that the town council authorizes town manager Sean M. Kimball to execute the memorandum of understanding with Smart Power for participation in this campaign per the terms and conditions presented.
Second.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Jinks, for the second. Any further discussion?
From Energy, there's nobody here from Energy, but I will just give you a quick synopsis. PowerSmart is a group of 28 community-based campaigns in Connecticut that is trying to encourage residents to adopt solar energy and new battery storage systems. It's a program that's funded by the U.S. Department of Energy under Solar Energy Evolution, and it's trying to encourage people to look into alternative solar energy solutions. It's a nonprofit group. It is a group that is dedicated to educating the consumer. This is not something the town is doing specifically. We are only authorizing this group to be able to provide educational material to our community members and residents who might be interested. And this Smart Power group will be providing all sorts of perhaps actual meetings to talk about it, and lots of mailers and interesting information for people to educate themselves on this new battery storage thing. I have to admit that I do not know much about the battery storage thing, but certainly am willing to investigate. The programs that they're offering are all interfaced with Connecticut Renewable Energy Solutions and energy storage solutions, and there are additional incentives under the Energy Storage Solutions program for those folks who are below 60% of the state median income, and the residents can choose any contractor they want if they decide to go with this plan. And what else? There's a federal tax credit of 30% for solar energy and battery storage systems under the Inflation Reduction Act. So it's something that if you as a resident have an interest in preserving our environment, looking into solar options, this is just a means for us to authorize this group to be able to give you the information that you need to make those decisions.
Okay, and of course, Sylvia, that was a subject of a presentation at our last council meeting, which hopefully, some people got a chance to see, and I'm not certain I saw any reporting on it in the local paper, but perhaps there will be some. And of course, I'm sure the Energy Commission will be saying something about this as well. And will anything be, I do have a question for Sean. Does this obligate us or encourage us to put something on our website, like under the news, brand new news section on, say, the front page of our paper that'll give them a link to contacts? Or is that something contemplated or not allowed?
I know they will provide us with documents, and I think the expectation is that we'll be putting something out on the website and
Right.
participating in one way, shape, or form. So I think that it's sort of incumbent upon.
I thought
participation
that
we
that's
will
what,
share that.
I thought that's what I recalled, and I know Energy couldn't be here tonight. We made it harder with Zoom, I'm sure, unintentionally, of course. But okay, well, that's great. Any other questions? Okay, so with that, I'll call for a vote on this. All those in favor signify.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, looks like we have another 8-0. So that would be unanimous of all those present. Terrific. So now we move along to G, which is the authorization to apply for and acceptance and appropriation of the Connecticut State Library 2024 Historic Document Preservation Grant for the Town Clerk's Office Documents Imaging. Mr. Bowery.
Thank you. Town Council approves resolution 031423-8. Be it resolved that the Town Council authorizes application for and accepts and appropriates the 2024 Historic Document Preservation Grant from the Connecticut State Library in the amount of $8,000 for document imaging in the Town Clerk's office.
Terrific. Thank you, Mr. Belliber, for the second. Discussion. I know you guys talked about that in budget. We were all present, but there may be questions. Ms. Nichols, you weren't present. That's right.
I just have a thing is everything. This is going to allow the transfer of 27,211 images, and that's a lot of land documents. Back to the beginning, right?
Right. Mr. Belliber.
Thank you very much. And I've been a supporter of this as Laura has brought this to the council because I think it's important for us to digitize our land records to get them as far back as possible. It allows for easier use and utilization of those images. And this is pretty impressive for us to be able to get back to, if we can get back to 1956, that is a pretty impressive time frame to get back to for many of our documents. Most towns don't get back that far. This allows title searchers to do even more than a full marketable record title search. So this is pretty impressive if we can get back to 1956. So I'm in favor of this.
And that's almost back to my birth date. Oh, come on. Great. Any other questions? Okay, I'll call for a vote on this. All those in favor signify. Opposed, motion carries unanimously of those present. For the record, that is 8. Boy, I must be really digging it to Sandy Pavano. I shouldn't be saying that. We miss her though. We now go to H, which is the correction of a typographic error in a resolution and legal notice for the Veterans Tax Relief Ordinance Amendment. And I'll call upon you, Mr. Belliber, since this was not your doing, but your motion.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Be it resolved, the Town Council approves Resolution 031423-9. Be it resolved, the Town Council hereby corrects the error in the February 2nd, 2023 legal notice from Resolution 012423-2, Town Ordinance Section 17-13, Veterans Tax Exemption, subsection A, to read, quote, "This subsection shall become effective February 1, 2023, and will apply to the October 2023 grand list for tax bills dated July 2024.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Walsh, for the second, and thank you, Mr. Belliber, for the motion. And I must also comment on the eagle eyes of whoever double-checked that and thank them in advance. Any further discussion or questions?
No, obviously it's pretty self-explanatory. Obviously we missed that, but somebody else didn't miss it.
That's
So we appreciate that. And to clarify this, because this is obviously a very important benefit that we would like to give our veterans and make sure they're able to take advantage of this to the best of availability.
Perfect. Okay, I'll call for a vote if there's no other questions. Oh, Mr. Walsh, you had a question? Oh, that's a vote, right? Okay. Everybody's voting. Very good. Vote carries unanimously of those present. Again, 8-0. And this brings us on to the end of regular business and on to reports from the town manager. That would be the monthly status report. We've got
All
our.
right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much.
I will try to share my screen one more time here. I'll quickly go through the town manager report and answer any questions on this or any of the supplemental materials. Just a few updates for this month. A reminder that the 2023 neighborhood assistance applications are open and due June 2nd. This is the tax credit program designed to provide funding for municipal and tax exempt organizations by providing corporation business tax credits for businesses who make cash contributions to these entities. Each municipal agent or tax exempt organization that wishes to participate in the program must complete in its entirety the appropriate form, which are available on our website. Applications are due again Friday, June 2nd, must be submitted directly to the town manager's office. Interested organizations wishing to learn more about the program or have any specific questions should visit State of Connecticut Department of Revenue Services website, as the town's role is primarily administrative. Applications are approved by the municipality's governing body, the town council, and forwarded to the Department of Revenue Services. Once an organization is approved by the state, businesses can receive a credit of 60% of their approved contribution to certain programs, or 100% in the case of certain energy conservation programs, if approved by DRS. Also, as referenced briefly during my prior presentation on the budget, we are beginning, we're right in the process of revaluation to establish the new grand list for October 2023 later this year. This is again state mandated to occur every 5 years. The data mailers will be sent to all improved properties, those primarily properties that have had building permits in the last since the last revaluation. Participation of owners is critical, so we ask all property owners to correct or confirm all the data and return the form. Several inspectors from the revaluation company, Equality Evaluation Services, will be doing on-site inspections as well. Vehicle information for these individuals will be posted on the town's website. Their information has also been provided to the Cheshire Police Department. All inspectors will have an identification badge. Again, we recognize that in this modern age of ring cameras and also car break-ins, people are particularly aware and nervous about folks in and around their properties. So again, we're making very clear that these folks will be very clearly identified and the car and vehicle information is clearly identified. Data collection continues through September 2023. And again, the new mill rate that's based upon this grand list will be used for the July 2024 tax bills. That'll be for fiscal 25, the next budget, not the budget we're planning right now, but the subsequent budget. Again, the town's goal is to ensure that all property information is correct, so accurate values can be applied. If you have any questions about the data mailers, you can contact the assessor's office, but we'll also be publishing some frequently asked question information just about reval in general, why we do it, some, again, frequently asked questions on the town's website here in the coming weeks.
Hey, Sean, may I
yeah,
stop you here and ask a question
Please, sir.
relative to that?
Sure.
This particular reval is exclusively a questionnaire. There's no drop-ins or permission to enter or anything like that goes on with this, or could I get a little clarification on that?
Yeah, no, so this one is a full revaluation, so a full property inspection revaluation. So
it could
not
invite
yet.
it could invite some of that then, because that's
Exactly,
something-
yeah. It is a very experienced company. I mean, they probably do the most revaluations in the state of Connecticut. They've been, doing this for a long time, and they've kind of improved their processes over the years to make sure they're clearly identifying folks. And that, again, part of the frequently asked questions information that we'll have on the website explains, the rights that property owners have, and why this information is important to clarify, not just to have an equitable grand list, but also to make sure there's no errors and to minimize the number of appeals that are necessary so we get accurate information. But yes, this is a full property revaluation, which really occurs every 10 years, to your point. Every 5 years, there's kind of a less of a full property inspection.
And because nobody really goes to a website, I mean, it's just impossible to remember some of these things. Do you know as a rule, or can you find out and just let us know as a rule how many in-home or in-business inspections they may in fact make when they do a reval in a town like Cheshire? Is it 5%, 2%, 1%?
Right. Yeah, I'll get some more information from our assessor with the plans. I think, again, there's a lot of different data points when they're doing the reval from, plans and inspections and GIS, mapping and satellite views and all those things. So there's a variety of sources, and I think sometimes they're out there just to confirm whether something's in fact completed. Again, you don't want to go just off of a building permit because maybe somebody pulled a permit and never did the project or things like that. But certainly we can get more information, and there will be press releases and other social media announcements, because again, the more informed people are, the less likely there's any, mistakes or misunderstandings. And again, we are mandated to do this by state statute. So we just want to make sure that we do it as effectively and equitably as we possibly can.
Well, this just gives everybody time to vacuum. So,
Yeah,
okay, great.
sure.
Thank you for that interruption.
No problem. No, great question. And again, I'm sure we'll get more questions as the summer, kind of spring and summer months come along, and people, become more aware that revaluation is going on. This next Saturday, March 18th, we'll be having our electronics recycling event. This will be at Quinnipiac Park, 1325 Cheshire Street. As in the past, I won't read all of the included items, but these are for your electric recyclable items, and laptops and computers. Just a reminder that smoke detectors, car batteries, and appliances containing Freon, like AC units, are not accepted. And so if you have any questions for that, contact our Public Works Department. And this month I have another economic development update from our coordinator, Andrew Martelli. Just a few quick items. 40,000 square foot refrigerated truck repair facility is under construction at 551 West Johnson Avenue. Hartford Healthcare has submitted plans for a second floor fit out of their surgical center on West Johnson Avenue, 765 West Johnson Avenue. Estimated value just under $2 million. Construction continues at 306 Highland Avenue. That's the dentist office on the right as you're traveling north, and 435 Highland, which is across from Highland School or the police station, which will be the learning experience daycare facility. Finishing touches at the Parkside Apartment Homes at the corner of Route 10 and Higgins. HOB Hobb Industries is completing their multi-million-dollar renovation of 25 Nodder Drive. Also 150 Nodder Drive, which is 150,000 square foot manufacturing facility on 30 acres, is transferred for $6.1 million. Kurtz Farms submitted building plans on an approximate 6,700 square foot office building at the corner of Peck and Schoolhouse Road. Building permit plans are being reviewed for 64 apartments on East Mitchell Avenue. The Whole Foods distribution facility is completing a $500,000 upgrade to their facility at 400 East Johnson Avenue for 2 banana ripening rooms. Andrew was insistent that I include that item. The town receives the state's evaluation. Oh, the town received, this is important information for the town council. We did just receive a few days ago the state's valuation, if you recall, for the 691 conveyance property in the north end. With, as you recall, we are required to market the property, sell the property for the average of 2 valuations provided by an appraiser. And we receive information from the state that the average of the 2 appraisals that they've just completed comes to a total value of $2,085,000. And lastly, last night, the Stonebridge Commons lots 1, 5, and 6, which is the commercial component of the project in the north end, received final site plan approval, which equals approximately 135,000 square foot. We have included some updated renderings. I know we forwarded some of these to the council before, but as these are now public, having gone through public planning and zoning, just quickly on my screen, oh boy, all zoomed in here. Just a few updated images of this project, which I know the council's been keeping very close tabs on, as we all have been. A few of these are similar to the renderings that we saw before. There was one image that I thought was particularly kind of helpful to see and visualize the entire project. It's this one, if you hadn't had a chance to see it, which kind of gives you a sense for the entire property and the freestanding buildings on as part of the development. So yeah, very exciting project for the town and the town's growing grand list. I'll breeze through the rest of this, but I'll happily, well, this is included in the attachments that I forwarded on earlier with my town manager's report, if anyone wants to take a closer look. And lastly, I will just wrap up. Here we go. With upcoming town council meetings, we have the personnel committee is meeting on March 21st at 5 p.m. via Zoom. Our regular council meeting will be April 11th. But before we get there, as you well know, we have a number of budget workshops listed here, and I already went through them earlier. And one last note, town offices will be closed for the observation of Good Friday on April 7th, and there will be no garbage or recycling delay that week. Other than that, Mr. Chairman, that concludes the monthly town manager report.
Thank you for that report. Any questions of the town manager? Well, you're off the hook. I guess we all know we're going to see you plenty in the next couple of weeks, so that's
You'll
good.
be getting tired of me in no time.
Nah, I never get tired. Just get even. So with that, we'll now move to chairman's report. I'll start with budget. Mr. Bowery.
All right, I think everything's been included in what we discussed earlier. Thank you.
Absolutely. Can I have you hang in for planning in the absence of Sandy? Is there anything to report?
We have not had yes, we did. We had a meeting on the sidewalk ordinance, and sidewalk application process if people want west sidewalks, and it is still in process of being reviewed.
Okay, thank you. I know I caught you cold on that, but I appreciate it. That's helpful. Mr. Walsh with solid waste.
No report right now. We're going to be discussing the bulk trash pickup during our regular budget hearing, so that'll be a discussion then. And so we should be having another meeting soon to discuss more about the NEFTA funding that we're getting from the state. So that'll be something that we'll be discussing.
Maybe that can also come up in some of the budget conversations too. I mean, maybe there'll be a placeholder for that when we come up with that. We have ordinance, Mr. Veliver. I know you've been busy.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I appreciate the council's approval of the last two ordinances, and looks like we're getting another referral, so we'll probably have a meeting soon.
Thank you for that. Personnel, Ms. Nichols.
Yeah, you just heard from Sean. We have a meeting scheduled next Tuesday, and this one basically is working on job descriptions.
Okay, very good. Audit, I assume, has nothing to share at this time. Okay. Very good. So the only other referral I would have for ordinance would be the tax refund ordinance. So
we look forward to, I think that's a great idea and it's a great suggestion. And it is, as I think it's nice to have a new set of eyes looking at some of these things and coming up with some suggestions from their experiences in other towns when they bring. So I think it's a good thing to look at. So look forward to it.
Okay. So the ubiquitous miscellaneous is once again before us. Anyone have anything? Okay, good.
Wait, Tim.
Yes, you do.
Yeah, I do have something, and that's are we on liaison reports? Is that where you
Not
were?
quite yet, but we're close.
Okay,
We're
I'm
not there
sorry. When
yet.
I saw miscellaneous, I looked at that miscellaneous.
But it's a great way to start with liaisons because I don't know all the committees. You're all going to have to speak up.
Okay. I'd like to bring a little measure of relaxation and culture to the meeting. I am liaison to both the library and the arts, performing fine arts. And I just want to give a shout out to the people who are involved in both of those boards and commissions. The library is doing wonderful things with programs. They had a wonderful concert this weekend of Irish music, which again brings forth the topic of parking, and it instituted a little conversation about some ways that might be solved, and we'll talk about that going forward. The Performing and Fine Arts had a program for personal development for employees in town, as we try to encourage our employees to learn more about what's going on, and we hosted an arts day for the employees to come, and we all did, including the committee and myself, we all did drawings of robins, which you can see in the new entryway of the library, which has got the brand new sliding doors, or automatic opening doors, and a new floor there. And I think the people who attended those workshops were thrilled, and so pay attention to the things that are offered by Arts Place. So just fun things instead of budgetary discussions.
Okay, so with that, I'll just ask my colleagues to just shout out any reports necessary for their for the committees they oversee, if they have one to make this evening. I don't see any then, so, oh, Mr. Jenks, unmute, please.
Yep, I should be unmuted, right?
Yep.
Yeah, beautification committee, their last meeting, they reviewed the plans for, the landscape plans for Lot 5 of Stonebridge. And they were quite pleased with the amount of plantings that are being planned there in terms of the types and the colors, and the fact that there's going to be plants that support pollination. And so they were generally pretty pleased with it. I think the developers are going to be doing a very nice job. I don't think the renderings actually probably do it justice as far as the landscaping goes. But as I said, the beautification committee reviewed them and had a couple of small suggestions, but we're generally pretty happy with it. And I think the community is going to enjoy the look and the feel of the development as well.
Thank you for that, Mr. Jenks. I did watch that public hearing last night and their vote, and the plantings did come up, and there was a lot of applause for what had been selected. So they must have also had an opportunity, and they did mention, or at least one of their members mentioned, that beautification was quite pleased with everything. So it all bodes well, and hopefully this thing can really get off its its launch pad. It sounds like a very positive, like it's about to happen. So keep our fingers crossed. Anyone else have a report to present? Okay. So with that, we have appointments to boards and commissions. I know Mr. Veliber's been all over this, but I don't know if there are any other appointments.
I have none other than that. Just
What about you, Mr. Talbot?
I have a series of corrections, Mr. Chair. Apparently, after the appointments that I made from February were given to the clerk, there was some discrepancy with some of the dates that the DTC had given us. So let me offer up the following corrections, which will change the term of the office of the following individuals. Helen Wilson, Historic District Commission alternate to 1/31/2026. James Doheny, Public Building Commission. He's filling Rich Gussenberg's seat. The term is to 1/31/27. Hap Jordan, Youth and Human Services alternate. Term is till 1/31/2025, and that's filling the vacancy of Andrea Haslett. Marlena Sobel, Youth and Human Services Committee, fills the vacancy of Eric Gunther, term to 1/31/25. David Arai, Public Building Commission, to 1/31/2027. Stephen Durkee, Public Building Commission, to 1/31/2027. Christine Endress, Performing and Fine Arts, to 1/31/2026. Denise Lohr, Performing and Fine Arts, to 1/31/2026. Pat Archibald, Town Beautification, to 1/31/2025. Marie Colacry, Beautification, to 1/31/2025. And Susan Dillman, Beautification, 1/31/2025. Apologize for the confusion.
No issues, no concerns.
those, Peter, we all have those issues on occasion.
Mr. Chairman, I have a
Yes.
question. Peter, my understanding was that your appointment for the Human Services was to fill the term ending for John Nan, not filling the vacancy of Eric Gunther. Eric Gunther is a Republican vacancy, and so I was just curious. There was a term there that was up for John Nan, whose term ended in 2023, January 2023. That's who I thought you were filling the vacancy of. Because at the meeting you weren't sure whose vacancy you were filling. I just wasn't sure. Are you sure that you're filling that vacancy?
I wish I could say I was, Mr. Bell.
Do you want to just pull that one for
Why
clarification?
don't we hold that one for I was sent these corrections, from the
Yeah.
clerk's office. So let's get clarification on that one, David. And, so we'll pull that one and forward the other ones. How's
I
that?
agree with that. I was just looking at my notes and I just wrote down here, Eric is a Republican. John Nan was probably the one that she's filling because that's.
And
And his
I
term
think
was
that's
up.
what I had presented at the
Yeah.
last meeting, but, and I don't know if Noel, can you shed any light on that particular one?
I can't, but I can only say that what the form was given to me did say Eric Gunther, but it could, I know that he did it very quickly, so I'm not sure if they wrote down the right person.
I think that I think David, you're right.
I just want, because I wasn't sure at the last meeting, when I came over, I asked her, because I wasn't sure, because I knew you weren't sure when you filled in what that name was. So I just wanted to find out if we're, if we're talking about the same one, that's all.
So let's pull that one and then.
Yep, let's pull that one and
They can still attend the
finalize
meeting.
the others.
Yeah, they can
Okay.
still attend the meeting because,
Yep.
they haven't been replaced by themselves yet.
Exactly. Thanks.
So-
Well, with that, I have one more name to put up. At the last meeting, we filled a couple vacancies for the student representatives, but there was one name that had come up that she believed that she had been appointed, and she was told to go down and she got sworn in January, but apparently had never officially been sworn in, approved by the council. So in order to sort of remedy that, I would want to put in the name of Mackenzie Dudek to fill the vacancy to replace Caitlin Pear as the high school representative to the Youth and Human Services Committee, with a term effective of March. I guess I unfortunately I don't think we can go retroactive. We can only appoint it from today, but I'll say from March 14th until January 31st of 2024. So I put that name into nomination. She's just to fill out, and that will finalize all of the student representatives on the Youth and Human Services.
I'll second that, David. Right.
Thank you for that.
Yep.
Okay, so I guess we're ready to call for a vote on this. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously of those present, 8 for the record. So with that, we next move to letters to the council. Oh, town attorney report. Do you have anything further to report other than your great reporting earlier tonight, Jeff?
No, Mr. Chairman, no additional report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we go to council communications. I'm not personally in receipt of anything other than an invitation to march in a parade. Does anyone else want to report a letter to council that they're interested in sharing? Ms. Talbot?
Thank you. We actually did receive a letter that I missed because I checked it before the meeting and we didn't have it at that point, but if I could
Sure.
ask your indulgence, I just need to find it. And I would like to read it into the record. Okay. This is a comment from Dr. Barb Massey of 40 Manor Drive in Cheshire. And she wrote to the town manager, our email account regarding budget concerns. Dear Town Council, as a Town of Cheshire resident, I have observed with increasing concern the Town of Cheshire leadership inability to either educate itself in the appropriate town public services needs for its now 40% population age 50 and over, or even microscopically modify the Town of Cheshire budget to address these needs. That 40% of the population is funding the lion's share of the Cheshire budget expenditures and receiving nothing in return. While I have heard the mantra that we should all be willing to pay for the education expenses of future generations, we are in unprecedented times. Our boomer population is growing and is not, despite faulty town population projections, going to be selling their homes to younger families at the projected rates. No, Town of Cheshire leadership, they will be staying in their homes as there are no longer cheaper retiree alternatives. And though they stay, that 40% is invisible according to the FY24 budget. They will receive just about nothing in return in services thanks to Town of Cheshire leadership. I demand as a resident that the FY24 budget is the time to start understanding and appropriately funding the public needs of that 40 plus. That the charming and absurd social services budget is all there is for senior citizens. That tiny budget is dwarfed by the equally absurd and growing education budget. This disastrous skew in policy has got to start changing now, not next year and not 5 or 10 years from now. If you would like expert community input on how to move forward, if you would like to learn of US town models that have taken on this new world of massive elderly populations who do not move out despite town projections, please do not contact me. Best, Dr. Barbara Massey. And I would also like to apologize because I did miss that email. It was sent after I had started this meeting and I should have checked, and I want to apologize to Dr. Massey and the council for missing that email. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Arnett, for making, I don't think any need to make an apology, but certainly please share it with every member of the council. We are entering our budget season. I know every budget that's probably ever existed in the town of Cheshire has always been weighted towards educating the population, which is always going to be bigger than any other thing we do. I know too, we've all endeavored to have enhancements for those with, I would say, stably leveled incomes. And I know that's where the greatest concern probably is being registered. And I know too, and I believe all of us know that, yeah, things do cost a tremendous amount and projections can be wrong. So we will take this letter under thoughtful consideration, but be certain we won't be, making the education budget 40% and the senior budget, 30%. It's just one of those things that happens in life. Sort of decisions are made that we sort of have to live with, but we can certainly amend everything within reason and see what we can do. And we'll also make sure she gets some demonstrations of what the council has done to the best of its ability over the past 2 or 3 years, including the veterans and the senior credits and some of the other things that we do in fact do. So again, this is not a bargaining session with Ms. Massey, but only one to serve as a public response to her letter. So thank you for that. Any others? Okay, so with that, are there items for executive session, Mr. Kimball?
There are not, unless you had any others, Chairman Slocum. I don't believe we did, right? I don't think
No, we had under our regular meeting schedule. That's why I asked, because again, when we changed the format, I had forgotten this morning to follow up with you to see if we had anything confirmed. So we'll take up that other item when it's appropriate. Okay, so with that, I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Thank you, Mr. Jinks. It's been a wonderful meeting. I think we did something really big tonight, maybe a handful of big things, but I think we're all proud to be able to help in the moving forward of the school project. So with that, good night, everybody.